The eternal vape versus cigarettes debate is still raging on. In the red corner, you have cigarettes, the established foul-smelling way to intake your nicotine with years of research behind its effects. In the blue corner, you have the newcomer, vapes, with little research behind their effects and nice-smelling clouds of nicotine to mask their dangerous nature. They've become a crowd favorite. But which alternative is worse for your health? First, let's take a look at smoking. You can smoke lots of things, obviously. Since we here at the Infographics Show don't want to condone anything illegal, let's assume smoking means regular tobacco cigarettes. Tobacco is the common name for plants in the Nicotiana genus, a type of leafy herbaceous plant native to North and South America. The one tobacco subspecies, Nicotiana suaveolens, is found on the east coast of Australia. Tobacco plants are a member of the nightshade family, a group of plants that also includes tomatoes and eggplants. The leaves contain a type of neurotoxin called nicotine, which acts as a natural insecticide and makes the plant unappealing to most plant-eating animals. But as we've seen throughout history with things like magic mushrooms and ghost peppers, a plant being poisonous and tasting unpleasant has never deterred humans from putting it in their mouths. Tobacco leaves have always been incredibly popular among the indigenous people of the Americas, with archaeological evidence suggesting that medicinal, recreational, and spiritual use of the plant dates back over 12,000 years. Even today, tobacco is an important part of religious rites and political agreements for the Native Americans. You've probably seen the native characters in cowboy movies smoking peace pipes before. Well, that's only one ceremonial use of tobacco in Native American culture. It's also given as an offering to the gods or as a gift to tribal leaders, and among the Cree and Ojibwe people, it's a crucial part of their purification rituals performed in a sweat lodge. When Europeans first colonized the New World, tobacco was one of the many discoveries they brought back with them, and it was an instant hit. Like the Native Americans, Europeans took to using it as a stimulant, decongestant, and topical painkiller, but they also started smoking it recreationally. Doctors raved about its effects in medical journals. One Spanish doctor even claimed it could cure 36 different illnesses in 1571. In the 1600s, there was even a popular song by Tobias Hume called "Tobacco is Like Love." But like a lot of things that were used medicinally in the 1600s, tobacco's supposed benefits would later be shown to come with some pretty serious side effects. You're not watching this video from the 1600s, presumably, so we probably don't need to tell you that smoking tobacco is actually really bad for you. So let's go through all the negative health effects of smoking tobacco. First off, while nicotine is a very effective stimulant and a painkiller, it's extremely poisonous if consumed in large enough doses. And considering the leaf of Nicotiana tabacum, the tobacco plant most often used to make cigarettes, contains about 20,000 parts per million of nicotine, it's very possible to feel some of these effects if you smoke enough. On the mild end, nicotine poisoning can cause nausea, lightheadedness, nightmares, uncontrollable hiccuping, and flatulence. On the severe end, it can cause vasoconstriction, the shrinking of blood vessels, heart palpitations, diarrhea, severe anxiety, and even death. That's bad enough on its own. But when you combine that with the fact that nicotine is also highly addictive, you got yourself a potentially lethal cocktail. Even if you decide to quit, you're still not out of the woods. You can still get nicotine poisoning from chewing nicotine gum and topical patches that smokers use to wean themselves off cigarettes. Worse than the nicotine itself is the slew of other chemicals introduced into the cigarette by the curing process. Tobacco has to be dried in the sun before being sold. This decreases the potency of the nicotine and makes it safer to consume. However, that decreased potency is quickly canceled out by the chemicals that are added during the curing process. These chemicals are meant to improve the smoking experience by doing things like helping the tobacco and cigarette wrapper burn at a more even rate and helping the body process the nicotine. But most of these chemicals are also poisonous in their own right. According to the American Lung Association, among the 600 chemicals that make up your average cigarette are ammonia, acetone, methanol, butane, and carbon monoxide. Some of those chemicals might sound familiar, so let's quickly elaborate. Ammonia is one of the chemicals that your body flushes out when you pee. It's typically also used to bleach hair and as a component of explosives. Acetone is commonly available as a paint remover. Butane is highly flammable and normally sold as barbecue fuel. Carbon monoxide isn't really used for anything, but it is a byproduct of gas stoves and fireplaces that is so toxic you rarely hear about it outside of the sentence, "Make sure to replace the batteries in your carbon monoxide detector." Cigarettes also contain formaldehyde, a preservative used to embalm dead bodies and museum specimens. These chemicals are already pretty scary, but the addition of fire to the equation makes things even more sketchy as it causes those 600 chemicals to combine and remix into more than 7,000 new compounds. At least 69 of these chemicals are proven to be carcinogenic, which is just a fancy way of saying they cause cancer. One of these compounds is known as freebase nicotine, which reaches your brain much faster than normal nicotine when inhaled. In addition to the increased risk for pretty much every type of cancer, smoking also increases your risk of stroke, heart disease, osteoporosis, vision problems, and diabetes. That's a result of the vasoconstriction that we mentioned earlier. When your veins shrink, oxygen can't be distributed through your body as efficiently, and that leads to a whole host of chronic health conditions. One of the most gruesome side effects of smoking is the fact that a lot of those chemical compounds stick around in your lungs even after you've exhaled. These compounds bind together with burnt particulates that enter your lungs along with the smoke, combining together into a sticky black substance called tar, which can seriously clog up your lungs and cause long-term breathing problems. Another big health risk of smoking tobacco is secondhand smoke. This is the reason why smoking indoors is banned in most places, and public smoking is restricted to specific places. Once there's a lit cigarette in an enclosed area, all those fun chemicals dissipate into the air, meaning that if you smoke indoors, you expose everyone around you to the same chemicals that you're putting into your own body. Obviously, it's a much smaller amount, but it can still be a significant health risk. Studies have shown that repeated exposure to secondhand smoke can increase the risk of stroke by 20 to 30% and increase the risk of heart disease by 25 to 30%. And if that wasn't bad enough, a study published in the National Library of Medicine has suggested that there might even be such a thing as third-hand smoke. It sounds crazy, but it's true according to the researchers. You can even be exposed to carcinogens left behind on surfaces that someone has recently smoked around. So yeah, your school's health class teacher was not lying. And those scary PSAs you saw on YouTube weren't exaggerating. Smoking is actually bad for you. No wonder so many people are now quitting smoking and switching to vapes. It's so much cleaner and less addictive, and oh, most vape juices still contain nicotine? Even some of the ones that advertise themselves as nicotine-free? Well, that's a bummer. Already, that's a mark against vaping, since everything we already said about the nicotine in cigarettes is also true for the majority of vapes. The history of vaping is much shorter than the history of cigarettes. While tobacco companies had been researching nicotine vaporizers and smokeless alternatives to cigarettes since the 60s, the first commercially available electronic cigarette was invented in 2003 by pharmacist Han Lick. Han was a heavy smoker, but after his father's death from lung cancer, he decided to quit. But like a lot of people, he struggled to quit. In 2001, he had the idea to patent an electronic alternative to cigarettes that would vaporize nicotine and give people trying to quit something to mimic the sensation of holding a cigarette. Han had lofty goals for his invention, hoping that someday it would replace cigarettes entirely. Unfortunately, it seems that might not work out. As of the writing of this video, Han Lick has still not successfully quit smoking. Since their invention in 2003, e-cigarettes are now more commonly known as vapes and have evolved into a variety of styles ranging from those designed to look like cigars or pipes to more futuristic designs that can cost up to $200. Regardless of what they look like, most vapes work the same way. They have a mouthpiece, a heating element, a microprocessor, a battery, and a cartridge, which is loaded with e-liquid or vape juice. The atomizer contains a heating element and a wicking material that draws the juice out of the cartridge where it gets vaporized by the heating element, hence the name. Once the liquid is vaporized, it can be inhaled just like regular cigarette smoke. On the face of it, it sounds a lot cleaner than smoking. It's basically just breathing in steam with a bit of nicotine, right? Well, just like with cigarettes, it's not just the nicotine that you have to worry about. Vaping really took off in the West in the 2010s when it evolved its own subculture. The explosion of popularity was so fast, despite most countries not yet having regulations in place, bootleg e-liquid started showing up on the markets. And just like with alcohol during Prohibition, most of the bootleg stuff wasn't exactly made with consumer safety in mind. Back in 2019, the United States experienced an outbreak of over 1,600 cases of unexplained lung injury, 34 of which were fatal. The victims of this mystery illness had one major thing in common: they were all vapers. 92% of patients admitted they'd been using black market THC vape cartridges, while the remainder reported only smoking nicotine. The CDC notes that this might not be entirely reflective of the truth, since many of these victims lived in states where cannabis was illegal at the time. The lung injury, which doctors now call e-cigarette or vaping-associated lung injury, or EVALI for short, is primarily caused by an additive called vitamin E acetate, which is a type of synthetic vitamin E typically used in topical skin cream. Research has suggested that while vitamin E acetate is harmless when applied externally, it might have adverse effects on lung functionality if inhaled. Though this is the prevailing theory, the reality is EVALI could really be caused by any number of chemicals and additives that you can find in vape juice. At first glance, vape juice's typical ingredients seem pretty simple. Most e-liquids contain propylene glycol, which is pretty common in foods and medicine as a solvent. It serves as a base liquid that suspends the nicotine and flavoring. If the e-liquid doesn't use propylene, it'll probably use vegetable glycerin, a food thickening agent, which serves the same purpose but creates a denser vapor. With those as a base, the rest of the ingredients are nicotine and whatever food coloring and flavoring the manufacturers feel like adding. A lot of people would look at those ingredients and not see a problem. The kinds of flavorings and additives in e-liquids are probably also found in most kinds of soda. So what's the issue? Well, what they're not taking into account is that even though vapes use electronic atomizers instead of fire, they still create carcinogenic substances, even out of non-toxic materials. Since there's still so little regulation on the ingredients of e-liquids, there's always the risk that two perfectly innocent elements, when vaporized, could combine together to create something toxic. There are also plenty of things that, while they're safe to eat, you really shouldn't be inhaling. Take diacetyl, for example. It's got a scary-sounding name, but it's fairly common in artificial flavoring used in the US to flavor things like instant coffee, caramel, fruity drinks, and to add a butter-like flavor to microwave popcorn. It also occurs naturally in some wines. Sounds pretty tasty, but trust us when we say you do not want this stuff getting in your lungs. That's because if it does, you might develop a chronic condition called bronchiolitis obliterans. This nasty illness is colloquially known as popcorn lung due to the fact that the first recognized cases of it were all employees at a microwave popcorn factory in Jasper, Missouri. They spent so much time around the diacetyl that they ended up breathing in enough of it to become toxic. Following the discovery of the disease, a lot of food companies have switched out diacetyl for less harmful flavor compounds, but since it's still approved by the FDA, it still finds its way into a few products. As you can probably guess, flavored vape juice is one of them. A 2016 study published in Environmental Health Perspectives reported that out of 51 e-liquid flavors, 39 contained diacetyl, another chemical, cinnamaldehyde, which as you can probably guess is found naturally in cinnamon, has been shown to impair lung function in a study done by the University of North Carolina. These are just two examples, and given how inconsistent vape liquid production tends to be, that could just be the tip of the iceberg. Overwhelmingly, the advice from medical professionals tends to be that if it's not air, it shouldn't be going in your lungs. This is because it can disrupt movements of the lung cilia. Cilia are the little hair-like structures inside the lungs that move in regular wave patterns. Their job is to push bacteria and other nasties up and out of the lungs so they can be coughed out. Cinnamaldehyde, formaldehyde, and a bunch of other chemicals that end in aldehyde can have a paralytic effect on the lung cilia, which can take weeks to recover from. During that time, your lungs are missing a crucial line of defense against infection. Like we said before, formaldehyde is often added to cigarettes, and the effects of that on lung cilia of regular smokers have been well documented. The fact that other aldehydes, even the ones that are safe to eat, can have the same effect when added to vape liquid and inhaled is a relatively new discovery. Alright, so now we've explained the science behind the effects of both. It's time to answer the question, is vaping really healthier than smoking cigarettes? If you asked, most experts would probably tell you, yes, but only barely. E-liquid contains less nicotine than your average cigarette, and it usually doesn't contain any acetone or butane, but that doesn't automatically make it a healthier alternative. In fact, given that the effects of vaping still aren't fully understood, it is likely that new information could come out sometime in the future that proves it's just as bad for you as cigarettes. What about the commonly heard claim that vaping can help people quit smoking? Unfortunately, despite his hopes that his invention would make smoking obsolete, Honlick's ability to quit himself is pretty typical for a vapor. Most vapors continue to smoke cigarettes even after they start vaping. Emily Banks from the Australian National University Centre for Epidemiology has said that based on her research, there was limited evidence to suggest that vaping can help people quit smoking. As for secondhand smoke, there's not much research currently on whether or not walking through that guy's hot dog-scented vape cloud at the bus stop is going to put you at risk for lung disease, but a lot of people have theorized that we ought to err on the safe side and restrict vaping in public the same way we restrict smoking. Ultimately, e-cigarettes are still such a new technology, it's impossible to know the full extent to which they can be harmful to your health. The fact of the matter is, there's probably no fully safe way to consume nicotine on a regular basis. When it comes to the question of which one is the least bad, The World Health Organization's website probably sums it up best. Both tobacco products and e-cigarettes pose risk to health. The safest approach is to use neither. It takes a couple of attempts, but you manage to spark up a lighter and hold it up steadily in front of your face to light up a joint. A familiar woody smell fills the room and drifts out of your window on the afternoon breeze. You blink, steady yourself, inhale deeply, and fill your lungs up with warmth. But what happens next? Chemically speaking, biologically speaking, what is it about this little green plant that gets millions of people around the world to flock to it? How long has humanity been consuming it? And what exactly is it doing inside your body, inside your mind? To start, let's have a look at the chemical composition of the cannabis plant itself, rolled up in a joint in your hand. Native to Central and South Asia, the cannabis plant today is so popular, it's now grown to be a global economy of its own. From small-scale rural farming operations all the way through to drug super labs, including any number of illegal weed farms somewhere in the middle. Experts believe that there are well over 700 different strains of cannabis currently on the market, and this number seems only set to increase. Being able to identify which strain of weed you have in your hand can be very easy when buying from a legal dispensary, but if you live in a country or a state where marijuana is still criminalized, being able to verify exactly what it is you're smoking becomes more difficult. Looking down at the green mossy balls in your hand, do you know where in the world it's come from and what's inside it? Let's break it down a bit, or rather, grind it down. You've likely heard of the two most well-known active ingredients in cannabis. These are cannabidiol and tetrahydrocannabinol, or as you probably know them, CBD and THC. Over the last 10 years in the West in particular, CBD has been championed as a potential medical breakthrough. It's also been shown to have a calming effect on those with anxious disorders and is currently being tested as a treatment for psychosis, sleep disorders, muscle spasticity, and more. You might have seen ads for CBD oil products popping up in your feed claiming that it can solve any number of ailments. Research is ongoing, however, results vary. In the case of curing cancer, for example, so far there's no evidence to support that CBD has any kind of effect on the disease, despite what people on the internet might be saying. So, you smoke CBD to get high, right? No, CBD is usually extracted as an oil, and on its own it will not get you high. But it's still psychoactive, meaning it alters your mental state, typically leaving you feeling more calm and mellow. The feeling of being high comes from the main active component in marijuana, THC. Typically found in much greater quantities than CBD, THC can have a powerful psychoactive effect. To see what that means in practice, let's follow it as it enters the human body. You take in a deep breath of that joint and let the smoke fill your lungs. In this example, you're going to be our test subject, and you will be smoking weed. Smoking is one of the most direct and quickest ways to get high. This is because the smoke from your burning marijuana contains high levels of THC. The smoke is then inhaled, filling your lungs. At this point, you might experience some irritation, manifesting in the iconic smoker's cough from introducing an alien substance into your lungs. This, however, is not unique to smoking weed, as you're likely to see the same from people smoking or vaping conventional tobacco. The lungs are designed to quickly and efficiently transfer oxygen into the bloodstream when we breathe. Therefore, they have the capacity to take in large quantities of gas in one breath and get any number of elements or compounds from that gas into our bloodstream, and fast. The lungs aren't just empty chambers, they're full of tiny little air pockets called alveoli. The average human adult has roughly 480 million alveoli in their lungs, constituting about 1,500 miles of airways. That's the equivalent of driving from Miami to New Hampshire for our American viewers, or Madrid to Copenhagen for our European viewers. For everyone else, it's roughly 13,636,363.6 bananas lying end to end. Anyway, back to your lungs. In each alveolus, the THC from the smoke is transferred directly into your bloodstream, which then carries it all over your body, including to the critical area, your brain. As a result, it often only takes a matter of seconds for the user to start feeling the psychoactive effects of what they're smoking. So, let's crack your head open and see what's going on inside. Sorry, this might hurt a little. The THC and CBD bind themselves to receptors throughout your brain. The amygdala, for example, is responsible for anxiety, emotional responses, and fear. CBD dulls the activity in this part of the brain, but the THC component can stimulate it. While many users feel calmer after having smoked weed, others can feel a heightened sense of paranoia and worry, particularly on the come down as the calming effects of the CBD wear off. Looking at other parts of the brain impacted by the CBD, we have the basal ganglia, which is involved with motor control and planning, the neocortex, which processes sensory information, and the cerebellum, which is the center of motor control. All three of these areas are impacted by smoking weed, resulting in you feeling slower in general. Reflexes are delayed, information takes more time to process, and motor functions and speech slow down. Driving under the influence of marijuana can be very dangerous as a result. One study in the UK found that fatal accidents are 1.65 times more likely to occur when the subject is under the influence of marijuana, while another study in Canada found that accidents could be 2 to 4 times as likely. Most countries have strict laws for driving under the influence of weed, with zero-tolerance policies, made stricter by the fact that it can take over 48 hours for weed to stop showing up on a blood test. If they're testing your saliva, it can be up to 72 hours. Urine can be anywhere from 3 to 30 days, and it can even be tested in your hair follicles for up to 90 days. Fortunately, you won't find many traffic cops that are plucking out your arm hair for a routine traffic stop. However, it would be reductive to think that all weed does is dull your brain. THC is a very active component that stimulates a lot of neural activity. Colors look brighter, sounds are louder, music sounds more rich and layered. Food often tastes better under the influence of THC, giving the subject the illusion that they're really hungry. That's right, this is why so many people using cannabis experience the famous munchies, which is why having a stoner visit your home is potentially extremely dangerous to the state of your snack pantry and chip supply. Many people report having heightened imagination, being able to think outside the box or come up with fresh and exciting ideas. Artists all throughout history have partaken in recreational drugs in an attempt to broaden their horizons, dulling a lot of the negative sensations, such as feeling pain and anxiety, coupled with the stimulation from THC, results in feelings of euphoria. In short, you, our human test subject, have gotten high. But what does this high actually look like? Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's bandage your head up and take a look. So far, we've only focused on the THC and CBD, but there are hundreds of active components within cannabis, which vary in quantity and intensity depending on which of the hundreds of strains the user is consuming. On top of that, there's the method of consumption. While smoking or vaping gets the chemicals into the bloodstream quickly, the high only lasts around 3 hours or so. Many users instead take gummies or bake brownies and cookies. When weed is absorbed through the digestive system, it takes a significantly longer time to kick in, but when it does, the user can experience highs that go on for hours, even up to a day, as the digestive system slowly releases the chemicals into the bloodstream. All of this makes studying the effects of marijuana very difficult. As with almost any study, there are the caveats of which strain is being used, how the test subject is ingesting it, and who the test subject is. The human brain is an incredibly complex thing indeed. If you took a sample of the human brain that was the size of just 1 grain of sand, that sample would contain 100,000 neurons and 1 billion synapses. Now multiply that by 860,000 and you've got a human brain, just like the one that's sitting in your head, watching this video and feeling very smug about itself. Being able to quantify and measure exactly what's happening in an organ far more advanced and complicated than the computers we're studying it on has been a challenge in medical science for decades and will likely continue to be one for a very long time. While one individual might take 1 puff and spend the rest of the day feeling anxious, their elderly grandma might smoke a whole bowl and feel nothing but zen. So, for Nana's sake, is it dangerous? Well, on the whole, consuming marijuana is relatively harmless as long as you aren't driving, controlling heavy machinery, or performing open-heart surgery. The risks of smoking the occasional joint with the right amount of weed in it are low. So, why hasn't it been legalized worldwide already? And why are there skeptics out there, including in the scientific community? As is often the case with controversial topics, a lot of the conflict comes from political and cultural differences. To tell that whole story, we need to wind all the way back to China in 2800 BC, where we find the first recorded use of marijuana in history. Even that long ago, the cannabis plant was being used for medicinal purposes. Emperor Shen Nong, considered by many to be the grandfather of medicine, recorded the plant in his writings as being particularly useful. From that point, records of cannabis spread throughout India, Syria, Greece, and Rome. Various healing properties have been ascribed to it over the years, including cures for inflammation, depression, arthritis, and even asthma. Of course, most early medicine is notoriously rather unreliable. We're looking at you, leeches and milk transfusions. But there's always been something about this little green plant that's captured the attention of doctors and pharmacologists throughout the centuries. Often there's a grain of truth to the mythology that has sprung up around the drug. In Hinduism, for example, the god Shiva is given the title of Lord of Bhang because cannabis is his favorite food. For centuries, many Hindus believed that if you were suffering from a fever, it was the god's hot breath of anger upon you. Rituals were conducted where you would be given a quantity of cannabis to consume, so you would find favor with Shiva again. and your fever would pass. With modern medical science, we know that THC acts in the hypothalamus of the brain, reducing the body's temperature and therefore counteracting fevers. So, where did it all go wrong for weed's PR team? Why is it that many people in the West now include cannabis in the same conversation as crack, cocaine, and heroin, as opposed to paracetamol and penicillin? Well, medical marijuana was first introduced in the West in 1841 by William Brooke O'Shaughnessy, an Irish physician who spent years studying all kinds of different medicines in India. But the real origins of the USA's problem with marijuana began 200 years before that, in the Jamestown colony in 1605. Dissatisfied with the return on investment they were seeing, the English, and King James I in particular, demanded the colony change up the crop they produced to hemp, a plant within the cannabis family. The crop was a massive success and became the key to the early expansion of the American colonial settlements. George Washington himself famously grew hemp as one of his 3 primary crops on Mount Vernon. The plant was used to manufacture ropes and fabrics, but following William Brooke O'Shaughnessy's findings from India, Americans began to experiment with the plant's medicinal properties. The USA was still in relative infancy, with many laws and prohibitions being established. Drug laws at the time involved labeling products as being poisons, which restricted them to being legal only if prescribed by a pharmacist. Even then, the debate about cannabis varied from state to state, with some issuing it with the poison status and others believing it was exempt from these rules. At the time, opium dens were rife across America, and alongside them a number of hashish parlors popped up in which people would smoke various forms of hemp and cannabis. By 1880, these establishments were seen as quite fashionable, with many of the upper classes frequenting them. It's estimated that there were roughly 500 such parlors in New York City alone. The laws needed to be strengthened further still. Fraud and corruption were rife in the drug industry, with many falsely labeling their products for the sake of profit. The tighter that these restrictions got, the more people looked for loopholes. The government and the newly established Food and Drug Administration were pulling in different directions than a lot of the American public, who were looking to skirt prescriptions and drug laws in order to continue to get their highs. In the move to close the loopholes, cannabis was often grouped in with many of the much more addictive, much more harmful drugs that were plaguing the American population. The solution the American government came to was a zero-tolerance policy on recreational drug use, including the prohibition of alcohol and the criminalization of marijuana, which at the time they were spelling with an H. In 1971, President Nixon coined the term "war on drugs," where he declared drug abuse to be public enemy number 1 of the American people. The approach was incarceration with an iron fist. Possession, distribution, and consumption of banned substances would result in jail time. It's estimated that throughout this war on drugs, the USA spends roughly $51 billion annually on its endeavor to clean up the streets. To illustrate, with that money, the USA could give each Canadian citizen $1,416.67 per year just as a little thank you for being such lovely neighbors. Alternatively, they could give one lucky Canadian $1 a minute for 97,032 years. A large amount of this campaign against drugs has involved a level of fear-mongering. There's a lot of false information swirling around the world about the negative effects these drugs have. It rots the brain and causes psychosis. It's a gateway drug to stronger and more dangerous highs, and it is highly addictive. But is there any truth to any of these claims? Let's examine them one by one. Firstly, no, marijuana does not rot the brain. Rotting is the decay of dead organic material as bacteria and fungi consume it. That simply doesn't happen. However, the link to psychosis is a much more contested field, with evidence for both sides of the argument. Firstly, what is psychosis? It's a term that is thrown around a lot, especially in the world of drug use, but very rarely defined, meaning a lot of people attach their own fears, worries, and prejudices to the word. Psychosis is when someone loses contact with reality. The image of the world around them that the brain is painting doesn't match up with the objective reality surrounding them. The two main symptoms of psychosis are hallucinations and delusions, and it's important to know the difference between the two. A hallucination is when a person experiences something that isn't actually happening. Most commonly, this takes the form of hearing voices that aren't really there, or sometimes seeing things that aren't really there. In some cases, people have reported smelling, feeling, and tasting their hallucinations too, such as tasting blood in their mouth despite there being none. A delusion, on the other hand, is more abstract. It could be the feeling that you're being followed, or that there's a conspiracy in your workplace to harm you. Delusional people are often highly susceptible to conspiracy theories, as often the paranoid messaging chimes with their fearful delusions that their minds have already been generating. So, does marijuana cause psychosis? It's complicated. Let's go back to the chemicals active in your brain. We're gonna need to crack that skull open again, sorry. THC is highly psychoactive. This is where the feeling of euphoria from being high comes from. While CBD can decrease the levels of panic and paranoia in the brain, it's often present in much smaller quantities than THC, mainly as many cannabis farms compete with one another to grow stronger and stronger strains. Couple that with the fact that there are hundreds of active compounds within the cannabis plant, and it goes back to our earlier point about this being a challenging area of study. Therefore, many scientists rely on quite broad studies, taking large sample sizes of drug users and non-drug users and comparing the development of their brains over time, looking most notably at teenagers and young people. What they found is there is often a link between heavy pot smoking and psychosis. There are cases of people living with schizophrenia and bipolar disorders where the heavy use of marijuana is linked to the onset of those symptoms. What has not been proven, however, is that weed was the cause. Most scientists believe that weed can, in some cases, accelerate the development of underlying psychotic disorders. The brain is a very complex and delicate thing. If somebody has an underlying psychotic condition, then the consumption of drugs that alters their state of mind and heightens activities within certain sections of the brain can naturally lead to an exacerbation of those symptoms. Schizophrenia is believed to affect 1 in 300 people, while bipolar disorder affects 1 in 100. While these are quite small percentages, they are not insignificant. THC does carry the risk of triggering a psychotic episode if you're genetically predisposed to having a psychotic condition. The chances are very low and won't affect the majority of the population, but they are still there. Next, is it a gateway drug? The experience of a chemical buzz in the brain is a sensation that many of us try to chase in our lives. You get up and sing in a concert at your high school and you get a rush from it. You do it a second time and the high is worn off a bit. So you need a bigger crowd, and suddenly you're in a rock band on an arena tour. Chasing this type of bigger, better high is an experience we're sure many of you are familiar with. Studies have shown that in a minority of cases, the same can happen with marijuana. Usage of the drug can prime the brain, ready for more intense highs, which it then craves. This sounds bad until you realize the same thing happens with cigarettes and alcohol. Both of these demonstrate a similar connection to being a gateway drug to harder substances as marijuana. So why are those not held up to the same level of scrutiny? One thing studies have shown is that there is a much more powerful gateway drug out there: trauma. A difficult childhood, experiencing abuse, and going through acute pain and suffering are all far more likely to result in a person developing a dependence on hard substances. Weed is often a part of that journey, but in these cases it seems to be a symptom more than the cause of the problem. But is it addictive? Let's take a similar look at this question. You wake up one morning feeling tired, so you make yourself a cup of coffee. It clears away the fog, helps you focus on your job, and gives you a little endorphin rush from a good day's work. So the next day, you do the same, and the next, until one day you run out of coffee. You look in the jar and it's empty. A storm cloud gathers over your head. You go to work with a scowl, snap at your coworkers, have a headache by lunchtime, and come home feeling miserable. What's happened here? Well, the human brain is incredibly flexible. Your brain has gotten so used to the influx of caffeine each day that it's now rebalanced the chemicals inside itself to receive that caffeine boost. It's ready and it's waiting, so when the boost doesn't come, there's now a chemical imbalance. The same thing happens with weed. If you burn one down at 420, smoke weed every day, your brain's going to be sitting there at 419 rubbing its metaphorical hands together in anticipation. Coming off weed now feels hard. You have cravings for it, you feel irritated when you don't have it, you struggle to fall asleep, you lose your appetite, and you generally have a bad time. For about 2 weeks. Then you're likely back to normal. And that's because what we've described here isn't an addiction, it's dependence. It's very common and can be broken fairly quickly. Up to 30% of weed smokers experience some level of dependence, and it can be overcome by just taking an extended break and giving your brain some rest. That said, there's a small risk of long-term addiction. People under the age of 18 have brains that are still developing. They're still growing and changing and adjusting to the world around them. Smoking weed regularly at this stage in your life could lead your brain to building itself around the expectation that it'll be receiving those chemical hits every day, which may start as a dependence and could grow to be much more deeply rooted and could result in a lifelong addiction. If there's one thing you learned from this video, it's that marijuana, much like life, is complicated. There may not always be a straight answer to every question. Anyone who tells you that something is totally amazing and has no downsides will always be lying. Even ice cream has downsides. What's important is looking at the big picture. Is weed the devil's leaf that spells the end of society as we know it? No, of course not. But neither is it a miracle cure-all drug that everyone should take on a daily basis.
What happens when you finally kick the bucket, so to speak? Despite our mostly science-grounded views on death these days, it seems many of us believe in life after it. In 2014, UK citizens were polled by The Telegraph, and just under 60% of respondents said they believe some part of us lives on. In the US, still a very Christian nation, Pew Research in 2015 asked people what happened after you die. The survey found that 72% of Americans believed you go to heaven, which was described as a place where people who have led good lives are eternally rewarded. 54% of US adults replied that they believed in hell, which was described as a place where people who have led bad lives and die without being sorry are eternally punished. With that in mind, welcome to this episode of the Infographic Show, What Happens When You Die. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell button so that you can be part of our notification squad. It seems a lot of people do believe that after death we might be ensconced in some cloud-strewn paradise, or conversely, if we haven't adhered to the ethics prescribed to us by our chosen religion or denomination of that religion, we might be faced with eternal hellfire and the prospect of groveling to a bearded red man who hardly ever puts down his pitchfork. But let's start with some empirical realism and what actually happens to the body when we die. Physicians know you're dead because the heart stops beating and there is no longer any electrical activity in your brain. Brain death equals dead, although machines can keep you going a little bit longer. You can also have what's called a cardiac death, which means the heart stops beating and blood no longer flows through your body. The strange, even wonderful thing is, people that have suffered cardiac death but have been brought back to life have said they were aware of what was going on around them. Others have talked about walking towards a light in such a near-death experience. You can be brought back from what we call clinical death, but you only have a grace period of about 4 to 6 minutes. But let's say you get to the light and pass through. This is what we call biological death. Game over, the final whistle, dead as a dodo. This is where it gets kind of undignified, but what do you care, you're dead. Once you're definitely no longer with us, your muscles relax, and this means your sphincter will too, meaning that triple whopper and large fries you had for lunch will spill out of you. The gas you have in you may also leak out and cause a stink. The same goes for the pee you've got in your bladder. So dying, not surprisingly, is a bit of a messy affair. And men, you might even ejaculate. As for women, you may give birth after you have died if you were pregnant, which is something called coffin birth. It doesn't happen often though. Instead of pushing, it's the gases in the abdomen that squeeze the newborn into the world. As the body gets rid of what is trapped inside, noises may be emitted from your mouth as air escapes. Nurses and people working close to dead bodies have regularly reported hearing very alive-sounding moans and groans coming from dead bodies. You may twitch, but this doesn't mean there is life in you, these are just muscle contractions. You could also soon get an erection if you died lying on your stomach and the blood flowed down there. All your blood will pool to a certain area of your body. This is called livor mortis, and it's the reason parts of you will have that dark purple color you have seen on TV. These are the lovely things that can happen quite shortly after you go. With no blood flowing through your body, it will begin to cool down, known as algor mortis, or simply death chill. It will keep cooling until it is the same temperature as your surroundings. You will become stiff within about 2 to 6 hours, and this we call rigor mortis. This is because calcium is getting into your muscle cells. Cells break down without blood flow, and this leads to bacteria growth, and that's why you start to decompose. You may look like your hair or your nails have grown, but that isn't the case. What is happening is that your skin is receding, giving the impression of growth. The skin will loosen too, and blisters will appear on the body. The next stage is putrefaction, when bacteria and microorganisms start feasting on you. You'll soon start to stink as bad as anything you could have imagined while you were alive. One person described the smell as rotten eggs, feces, and a used toilet left out for a month times 1,000. It is unholy. Soon everything that is soft becomes liquefied, with things like bones, cartilage, and hair remaining strong. You're already well on your way to decomposing by the time you are being put in the ground, but if embalmed and buried, decomposition could be a slow process. Left above ground, you'll be a liquefied mess within about a month, feasted on by insects, maggots, plants, and animals. Underground, some experts say it might take 8 to 12 years before you are reduced to nothing but a skeleton. After around 50 years, even your bones will become part of the earth. We should add the rate of decomposition depends on all manner of factors, too many to list here, but we think you get the picture. While some people report that their near-death experience was a scene to behold, that's not always the case. One person writing on Reddit said his experience was as follows. It was just black emptiness, no thoughts, no consciousness, nothing. Is there really something else? Irish empiricist philosopher George Berkeley was so hell-bent on knowing what happens after death, or those moments during clinical death, that he actually hanged himself to the point of death with a friend nearby ready to cut him down before he died. He believed there was something between heaven and earth, perhaps what philosophers have called the ether. The story has become lore in philosophical circles, but it's thought all Berkeley really discovered was that hanging hurts your neck. French philosopher René Descartes believed the soul was separate from the body, as many religions will tell you, and perhaps when we die, something lingers on. Friedrich Nietzsche talked about the concept of eternal recurrence, or eternal return, meaning all existence or energy in the universe has forever and will forever keep repeating itself ad infinitum. You live the same life again and again forever. Now, doesn't that make you want to live well? Here we can make similarities to the Buddhist belief of the Wheel of Samsara, wherein all souls or lives will begin a cycle again after death, except not the same exact life. Something we call reincarnation, which some people say is connected to what we sometimes call déjà vu. Buddhists believe we can end this vicious cycle if we can become truly enlightened, therefore achieving nirvana. Or do we make our way to heaven after our bodies stop working, tipping our cap to St. Peter at the pearly gates, hoping he won't deny us entrance for stealing that candy bar when we went on a school trip to Niagara Falls? Will we be taken into paradise, a place replete with excellent foods and gorgeous maidens that make your dead knees go weak? Or will we simply seed the earth, our souls nothing more than a worldly fancy that took our minds off our cosmic insignificance and the feeling of futility that we sometimes experience here on terra firma? According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, smoking causes nearly 6 million deaths around the world each year, and current trends show that tobacco use will be responsible for more than 8 million deaths annually by 2030. It is the leading cause of preventable death in America, and as many as 16 million people are living with a disease caused by smoking, including cancer, heart disease, stroke, lung disease, and diabetes. So what if you quit the habit? How reversible are these risks? That's what we'll be exploring today. In this episode of the Infographic Show, what happens to your body when you stop smoking? Apart from the fact that it's bad for your health, there are many other reasons to quit smoking. It's expensive, it makes your hair and clothes stink, and in many places in the world, it's considered unsociable, with bans in bars and restaurants meaning you'll need to leave the crowd and head outside for a puff. There are plenty of pluses to kicking the habit, but what will the health results be? Let's take a look at how your body will change as time passes once you've quit smoking. 20 minutes. In less time than it takes to commute to work, your body will already be fixing itself. 20 minutes after the last cigarette is stubbed out, your pulse and blood pressure start to drop back to normal, circulation will start to improve, and your hands and feet will warm to their usual temperature. 12 hours. Cigarettes contain a lot of known toxins, including a harmful gas, carbon monoxide. This gas can be fatal in high doses, as it prevents oxygen from entering the lungs and blood. At 12 hours, halfway through your first day, your carbon monoxide level is back to normal, which is great for your heart, as it doesn't have to pump as hard to get enough oxygen to your body. Unfortunately though, it's at this point you'll be feeling the withdrawal and cravings. A couple of ways to fight these feelings are by chewing gum or sipping water. 24 hours. Well done, you've hit the 1 day mark. And the good news is that after just 24 hours, a person's blood pressure begins to drop, decreasing the risk of heart disease and blood clots that can lead to stroke. If you smoke a pack a day, you're twice as likely to have a heart attack as a non-smoker, and that risk has already been reduced considerably after just 24 hours. And with oxygen levels on the rise, physical activity and exercise will already feel easier. 48 hours. 2 days in is a good time for a tasty snack. Smoking damages the nerve endings, which decreases your ability to smell and taste properly. And after only 48 hours, your senses will get sharper as nerve endings begin to heal. Your body will also enter a detoxification phase, with your lungs kicking out mucus left from cigarettes. The downside is that this is when the toughest withdrawal symptoms show up. If you are a heavy smoker, you might feel dizzy, anxious, or tired, and you may also crave more food than usual. 3 days. After 3 days, the nicotine levels in a person's body are depleted. Ridding the body of nicotine leaves a person much healthier, but initially this also adds to the effects of withdrawal. At the 3 day mark, many people will become moody and irritable, experiencing severe headaches and cravings as the body readjusts. On the positive side, energy levels will increase and you will breathe more easily. During the first 3 months, this is when the major improvements start. After a couple of weeks, the cravings will subside and the chance of going back to the habit is far less likely. Your lungs become stronger and clearer, your blood flow has greatly improved, you can exercise without huffing and puffing so much, and the risk of a heart attack goes down even more. 9 months. 9 months after quitting, there will be major physical changes and improvements in the body. The lungs have significantly healed themselves. The delicate hair-like structures inside the lungs, known as cilia, which help to fight infections, will have recovered from the toll of cigarette smoke. Around this time, many former smokers notice a decrease in the frequency of lung infections because the healed cilia can do their job more easily. You'll also be able to take deeper breaths, and energy levels will be a lot higher and back to normal. 1 year, a big milestone with the habit in the distant past. Time to celebrate the achievement. The risk of heart disease has decreased by half and will continue to drop beyond this 1 year mark. 5 years. After 5 years without smoking, the body has healed itself so that the arteries and blood vessels begin to widen again. This means blood is less likely to clot, which lowers the risk of stroke to the same level as a non-smoker. And compared to when you first quit, you're half as likely to get cancer of the mouth, throat, esophagus, or bladder. 10 years. Lung cancer is one of the greatest risks a smoker faces, and after 10 years, a person's chances of developing lung cancer and dying from it are about half compared to a smoker. 15 years. And finally, after 15 years of not smoking, the chances that you'll get heart disease are the same as if you've never smoked at all. Your body has done a huge amount of recovery and healing, rejuvenating the tissue and cells. From the first few weeks of headaches and discomfort to a fully healed body, a long path, but the rewards are very real and very clear. There's no real argument to be made for continuing to smoke. As well as the changes to your health, your immune system will also improve, your hair may become thicker and fuller, and your skin will age less quickly.
Some call it the elixir of the gods, others call it hooch. A fancy cocktail might taste good, but it comes at a price: your health. Let's find out what the actual benefits are to giving up alcohol. Seconds after you stop drinking, your liver slowly filters out the toxins and sugars found in the alcohol. The molecule ethanol is what makes you feel drunk. It does this by binding to receptors in your brain. Most notably, ethanol binds to glutamate neurotransmitters, which in turn causes the brain to respond slower to stimuli. Along with glutamate neurotransmitters, there are several other receptors that ethanol binds with that slows brain function. The result of these inhibited receptors is what we call drunkenness. The reversal of this process can take a while, and the hangover that ensues after a heavy night of drinking is a mix of your body trying to get rid of the ethanol and other harmful molecules, along with dehydration. Unfortunately, if enough ethanol builds up in your system, it can kill you. After about an hour, your body has filtered your blood several times and metabolized the drinks you've had. The time it takes your body to break down the alcohol directly correlates to the amount consumed. About an hour after you stop drinking, your body starts to feel tired due to the high amount of energy it uses to remove the alcohol from your blood. And since it takes about 6 hours for your body to completely break down all the ethanol in your system and bring the sugar, water, and other nutrient levels back to normal, the lingering effects of drunkenness will persist. After you've had your last sip of alcohol, your body needs to rest more than usual to recover from your attempts to poison it. Unfortunately, until you get past this stage, it's difficult to have a good night's sleep. In fact, research suggests that alcohol actually increases alpha wave patterns in your brain, which are only supposed to be present while you're awake. This implies that alcohol tricks the brain into thinking the body is awake when it's really trying to sleep. But there is good news. If you manage to not drink for 6 to 12 hours, your body physically starts to change for the better. For one thing, alcohol has been shown to weaken your immune system. This might leave you susceptible to viruses and bacteria that are present at bars and parties. About 24 hours after you stop drinking, however, your immune system returns to normal. This is the first of many changes that will occur from sobriety. If you're a heavy drinker or an alcoholic, another much more noticeable change to your body will occur around 24 hours after you stop drinking. This is when withdrawal really starts to kick in. Your body may still crave the chemical changes that occur when you drink, and therefore you would start to develop symptoms such as the shakes, cold sweats, increased pulse, nausea, and anxiety. These will eventually pass, but the amount of time these withdrawals last is based on each person and how much alcohol they usually consume on a daily basis. Congratulations! If you make it to 3 to 5 days without drinking, the real benefits of sobriety start to kick in. You may find that your blood pressure begins to drop, and you will overall feel less stressed. Doctors often recommend that people with high blood pressure reduce the amount of alcohol they consume. So even if this is not your goal, less than a week after you stop drinking, your body will be grateful for that much-needed break. You also might notice your appetite begins to decrease about a week after you stop consuming alcohol. This is one of the reasons that people tend to lose weight when they quit drinking. The other reason is that on average, each drink you're consuming contains a couple hundred calories. And since the sugars in alcohol don't break down in your body very well, much of it gets stored as fat. If you can give up drinking for an entire week, you may also find your skin looks and feels better. This is because your body is now more hydrated. Not only does alcohol make you pee more often, but it also decreases your antidiuretic hormone levels, which plays a role in allowing your body to reabsorb water. Somewhere around the 7-day mark after you stop drinking, these hormone levels are back to normal and your body is retaining more water. This is good not only for your skin but for your body overall. Again, it's important to remember that the time between when you stop drinking and start seeing these benefits will vary depending on the person and how much alcohol they previously consumed. A couple of weeks without alcohol, and you might find your cognitive abilities start to improve. This is because the brain, like many parts of your body, is resilient. The damage done to your neural pathway by the ethanol can be reversed. You will never regain memories from when you blacked out while drinking or recover thoughts that were obliterated from overconsumption of alcohol, but many of your neural connections will heal themselves over the coming weeks and months. You'll see even bigger benefits if you quit for more than 1 or 2 weeks. Without the pressure of filtering alcohol, your kidneys will begin to repair themselves. Like the liver, the kidneys filter out toxins. They're not quite as affected by alcohol as the liver is, but overconsumption can definitely cause damage over time. After a couple of weeks of no drinking, the kidneys will heal enough to maintain proper fluid levels, waste excretion, and hormone balances. If enough damage is caused to the kidneys from excessive drinking, you will feel much better once they're healed. The organ that takes the brunt of the damage when you drink is the liver. It's a vital structure, and without it, you can't survive. So about 3 weeks to a month after you completely stop drinking, your liver will begin to thank you. It's around then that the tissue will start to regenerate fully and the liver will repair itself. Without having to worry about alcohol, the liver can focus on breaking down other toxins that are produced by the body, which overall will make you feel healthier. The regeneration of damaged tissue takes time, but it happens much quicker when you stop drinking. A month or 2 after your last sip of alcohol, your liver will begin working at full power again. Just reducing the amount of alcohol you consume on a weekly basis can be beneficial for your liver. But if you really want to thank this vital organ for all it's done to keep you alive, there is nothing better than giving it a rest from breaking down alcohol. And if liver regeneration wasn't a big enough benefit, there's another major change that will occur to your body after not drinking for around a month or 2. I'm sure you've heard that a glass of wine a day can improve the health of your heart. Well, too much drinking can also damage your heart and increase your chances of having a heart attack or a stroke. Around 2 months after you stop drinking, your heart will have repaired most of the damage caused by overconsumption of alcohol. However, the best thing you can do to increase heart strength is to exercise. By reducing or completely stopping your alcohol consumption and exercising more, your heart can become stronger and healthier. Even though this next change doesn't directly impact your body, something amazing happens when you stop drinking for a few months. Your bank account suddenly starts looking healthier too. Having more money could lead to less stress in your life, which would definitely be beneficial to your health. Research has shown that people who drink socially end up spending between $500 to $1,200 on alcohol annually. But if you live in a more expensive city and enjoy going out for drinks frequently, these numbers can be much higher. People who stop drinking have noticed that the money they saved was enough for a down payment on a car or to take the vacation they've always wanted to go on. These are clearly positive impacts on your life that may result in less stress and increased happiness. Interestingly, stress has a very similar effect on the body as alcohol does. It can increase blood pressure, cause heart problems, negatively affect your skin, and cause depression. Months after you stop drinking, your body might feel 100 times better due to a combination of less stress and allowing your organs to repair themselves. One of the most surprising changes to your body after you stop drinking happens without you feeling anything. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has found that alcohol can be a carcinogen. This means that there's a chance the substance can cause cancer. The research suggests that people who consume large amounts of alcohol are at a higher risk for certain types of cancer, which makes sense when you think about it. Since your body technically sees alcohol as a toxin and your liver is responsible for removing that toxin, it's no surprise that people who are heavy drinkers have a high risk of developing liver cancer. Some research also suggests that alcohol can cause an increase of cancer in the esophagus as well. More research needs to be done, but there does seem to be a correlation between heavy alcohol consumption and increased risk of cancer. This means that once you stop drinking, you're actually lowering your chances of your body developing cancer, and this benefit doesn't just persist for a few years, but for the rest of your life. Just to be clear, most doctors and scientists agree that occasionally drinking alcohol poses very minimal health risks. In fact, consuming alcohol in moderation might have some health benefits. However, health problems arise when overconsumption occurs. But to be fair, this is true with almost anything you put into your body. When you stop drinking, your body goes through several changes over time. But even if you only reduce the amount you drink, similar beneficial effects can occur. If you're planning to do something like Sober January or want to cut off alcohol for a bit and see how it goes, just know that you will definitely feel better after the initial shock to your system. However, the health effects that come from long-term sobriety probably won't occur in just a single month. If you want to drink from time to time, that's okay. You can still receive some of the benefits mentioned in this video just by limiting your alcohol consumption to 1 drink or less a day. By reducing alcohol intake, your body can recover and you can live a long and happy life, while also having a glass of hooch every now and then. According to World Atlas, people from the United States are surprisingly not the world's biggest soda drinkers. Folks down in Argentina are. These statistics tell us Americans consume on average an incredible 155 liters of these drinks per year. In Argentina, it was 156 liters on average. In third was Chile, Mexico, and Uruguay. World Atlas explained that by soft drink it meant flavored, carbonated, non-alcoholic beverage. You can look at the other statistics to find the Brits downing an average of 206 liters a year, but you have to look at the fine print, because sometimes soft drinks can mean any sweetened drink, including juices and sports drinks. What we do know is this: soft drink sodas are very popular. We'll discuss today if that's such a good thing. For years now, people have been warned about drinking too many sweetened drinks. We've been told that such drinks have been significantly consequential in what has been called an obesity crisis, from the USA to over the pond in the UK to many countries around the globe. If you're fortunate enough to have visited many countries around the world, you'll know that you can't go far without seeing Coke or Fanta or Pepsi or Sprite, not just the drinks but the ubiquitous advertising. Coke, in fact, is one of those universal words we all understand, like okay, taxi, pizza, or probably right now a bunch of words related to tech. In 2018, in fact, Coca-Cola, according to Forbes, was the 6th most valuable brand in the world. This is partly down to the advertising, not just the fact that it tastes, okay. You'll see these often sensual video ads wherever you travel, usually consisting of fit, good-looking people drinking a Coke and announcing that Coke is it. It's the real thing. And then a few svelte women and handsome men will look extremely happy and show you they're living life to the full. That's quite a statement for a soft drink, and perhaps if Coke was to embrace realism, the scene might go closer to some hyperactive child making his parents crazy, or some 300-pound unemployed Dorito lover sitting on the couch watching reruns of America's Funniest Home Videos in the afternoon. We don't mean to sound too cynical, but we doubt the ecstasy people feel in the ads after drinking a Coke is very close to how things usually look. But Coke and other soft drinks have of late lost some of their mirth, because a lot of people have started getting serious about this obesity crisis, and sugary carbonated drinks reportedly have a good stake in the crisis. Back in 1982, Coca-Cola created the Diet Coke, and this throughout the years has won over a lot of people. Pepsi had already brought out its diet drink, and later both companies started creating all kinds of supposedly healthier drinks. You might think that Coke Zero and Diet Coke are similar, but we're told the former is supposed to taste like normal Coke and the latter have a taste of its own. The difference is chemicals, but we'll get around to that soon. We can tell you that Coca-Cola, followed by Pepsi, followed by Red Bull, are the world's biggest companies in terms of soft drink sales. Other soft drinks such as Fanta and Sprite, also big sellers around the globe, are owned by the Coca-Cola Company. But those drinks don't sell anywhere near as well as the flagship drinks. We're told though by Coke on its own website that less sugar is popular. Here's what the company said: "Our original and iconic cola is still our top seller. However, 43% of the cola we now sell is made up of Coca-Cola Zero Sugar, Diet Coke, or Coca-Cola Life, which have less or no sugar." Okay, so we have explained to you in a somewhat long-winded way that people still drink Coke and other big brand soft drinks on average with as much enthusiasm as a thirsty elephant at a watering hole. But people want a different kind of drink because sugar has been demonized somewhat, from newspaper to popular podcasts that feature people telling us how we can live long and prosper, to depressing documentaries on TV that show us 14-year-olds in Arkansas that require a crane to lift them out of bed. Multi-billion-dollar companies now know their audience, and at some point, they accepted that no amount of implausible advertising can break the spell of a burgeoning movement. When the zeitgeist just says no to something, they have to adapt, change up their game, or get left behind in a sugar blizzard, which now people are trying hard to avoid. So then, one day, you're sat in your usual local eatery that now offers almost zero-calorie fake fish, organic rocket vegan ciabatta sandwiches, happily swilling down your can of sugarless or near-sugarless soft drink. Could you get any healthier? You feel like King Arthur chugging from the Holy Grail, or a Greek mythological creature that has slayed some dangerous beast. You are pure, you are right, and you will certainly let all your friends and possibly strangers know how right you are on Facebook. But then you're hit with something that feels like a lightning bolt and your face turns bright red because someone has just told you that diet sodas are bad for you. What an inconvenient affront this is. It's taken you 19 years to get off sugar and some dude gets in your face and almost makes you choke on your designer sandwich. And he says he's right. He knows this because he read it somewhere on the internet. Okay, you get the picture. This is a contentious issue. Only recently we watched an interview with David Sinclair, a Harvard professor who is one of the world's leading scientists trying to extend the life of human beings. He drinks Diet Coke, and when he told Joe Rogan that, Rogan almost had an aneurysm. We'll talk about what happened next soon, but first, let's see what others say. First of all, there are all manner of poorly researched health sites and dismally informed health gurus out there. Sometimes the information is barely researched at all, and some copywriter has just copied another website, mixed the words in a salad spinner, and rearranged them. Be careful what you believe, kids. We looked at a BBC article on this topic. Okay, so Britain's Beeb has been accused of a lack of impartiality at times, but it still has good investigative journalists and can call on experts when need be. It says a regular soft drink, often with around 200 calories in it, is certainly not the best way to drink your life away. We might also remember that some folks drink a lot of cans or carry away a soft drink from the convenience store that is so big they almost call on a friend for help. The BBC cites a study by the Imperial College London and 2 Brazilian universities, and the conclusion of the study was this. You're not gonna like this. That diet soft drinks are no better for you than the full sugar ones. This is what the study had said about artificially sweetened beverages, aka ASBs. There's no solid evidence to support the claims that they're any better for health or prevent obesity and obesity-related diseases such as type 2 diabetes. And that was the problem, right? The obesity and lifelong ball and chain of diabetes? The study told us that in the UK, these drinks made up a third of a teenager's sugar intake, and in the US, it's half. The study tells us that these kids will compensate with other sweet foods if they don't get their sugar hit from the can. The scientists say these kids will get their fix somehow. Although there was no direct evidence for a role of ASBs in weight gain, they found that there was no evidence that ASBs aid weight loss or prevent weight gain compared with the full sugar versions, said Imperial College London. Let's move on. Over in the US, the American Journal of Public Health tells us that many obese people drink these diet sodas. So we might ask again if these people just tend to eat a lot of sugary stuff or just too much in general and then think they're taking care of their future with a can of sugarless. It gets worse. The Obesity Society and its Obesity Journal said researchers followed 3,700 American adults for 8 whole years. Some had to drink 3 cans of diet soda a day and others no soda. What did they find? Well, they said those that drank diet drinks put on the most weight and were twice as likely to be obese than the non-soda drinking Puritans. Are artificial sweeteners fueling rather than fighting the very epidemic they were designed to block? Asked the journal. Okay, so it doesn't mean that if you drink a diet drink that you will not be fat, but it might not mean that if you drink them you will definitely put on weight. A lot depends on your lifestyle and what kind of body you have. We might add that causation is a tricky business, and just because something is associated with obesity, it doesn't mean it caused it. But as far as we can see, there is some correlation to obesity when drinking tons of sugary drinks. So why is taking the sugar out not working as it should? Or why even is there a possibility these angelic soups of non-sugar chemicals are making some people put on weight? It seems to contradict the laws of physics, writes Inc.com. In that article, it says that it could be the fact that when you taste something sweet, your body produces insulin. This could be why. According to that article, insulin is what tells our cells to either use sugar as food or store it as fat. Without it, our bodies can't process the sugar that lands in our bloodstreams. When your pancreas produces insulin to deal with anticipated sugar, but then no sugar arrives, it confuses your body and disrupts its metabolic processes. This story said, as we have already said, that these drinks also get your sweet addiction going, and they might also make some people think one Diet Coke must mean they're good to go with that family-sized bag of cheesy chips just before bedtime. Of course, those poor rats had to get in on the action. And in a laboratory, funny how rat comes in the middle of that word, test rats were studied after being given diet drinks. The results, we're told, was that their bodies acted as if they were about to receive a sugar hit. That sugar hit never comes, and this messes with the rat's head. Literally, it does some strange stuff in the brain. A researcher told the BBC, when the animals get real sugar, they're not as good at processing it. Their hormonal responses get blunted, their blood sugar levels go up, and it leads to weight gain. That explains a lot about the 8-year 3-can-a-day overweight folks in the US. Now we come to one of the main sweeteners, something that could easily pass for ice, the illegal kind, and in some circles is demonized with a similar force. It's called aspartame. Is this stuff really a silent killer, as all those wholesome websites will tell you? Is imbibing in this crystallized devil's breath tantamount to slow suicide? Will enough give you cancer? Will it make your babies pop out after only 8 months in the womb? Will it make you cough, sputter, your eyes water, etc., etc.? Now back to Joe Rogan and his interview with the life longevity bloke from Australia. Rogan said that in labs, when those poor rats were given a lot of aspartame, they got cancer and died. No sooner were those dead rats in the trash can than people all over the USA and beyond were vilifying drink makers as veritable serial killers. But as Rogan said, these rats were given a heroic dose of aspartame, a dose no human could ever take even if he mainlined diet drinks from a drip all day. We looked at the NHS website in the UK because we'll go out on a limb and say that organization likely did its research. The NHS said a lot of aspartame fear-mongering studies had little scientific basis, but added that indeed it is way sweeter than sugar. So if, like those rats, your brain gets all messed up with the stuff, you might just put on some weight. The US National Cancer Institute as well as the European Food Safety Authority have undertaken huge studies including thousands of people, and the conclusion was this sweet white powder doesn't cause cancer or harm pregnant women. Aspartame is quickly and completely broken down into byproducts, including phenylalanine, aspartic acid, and methanol, which then enter our system through normal routes. Hardly any aspartame enters the bloodstream, we're told. Another trustworthy resource, the US National Library of Medicine, asked, was the world screaming for all this sweetness and what has it done to us? It also said this: evidence does not support links between aspartame and cancer, hair loss, depression, dementia, behavioral disturbances, or any of the other conditions appearing in websites. It adds that trials don't prove in any way that the much maligned sweetener is bad for your health, but says that there's no evidence that switching to diet drinks will mean weight loss or no weight gain. Why do people hate aspartame so much? This is what the paper says. People resent interference with foods, and synthetic food components are regarded with suspicion. And maybe they should be, and we should always be careful what we put into our mouths. But the fact is, or at least the fact according to scientific research, and not some conspiracy theorist trying to drum up likes on social media, is that this sweetener won't do the damage many people once said it would. But it likely won't make you lose weight, and it's possible that it will make you put on weight. You might not get a sugar rush, but you'll get a synthetic high. Maybe you should just lay off hitting the cans of sugary drinks and drink more water. Water is the only virgin in town. She's the angel that our body craves, the purest juice that there is. A toxin flusher, thirst quencher, a soulmate, and a lifelong friend. Stay healthy, get buzzed on agua. That's our slogan for all you liquid lovers.
We all understand that our car needs fuel to keep it running. In the same way, our body also needs fuel in the form of food to power our continued existence. The food we consume provides us with a range of different nutrients, such as vitamins, minerals, water, carbohydrates, fiber, fat, and protein. These nutrients have varying uses, like keeping the organs healthy and operational, the brain in working order, and also ensuring our cells continue to regenerate. When a car runs out of gas, it stops running. What if the body runs out of gas? What happens? That's what we'll be looking at today. In this episode of the Infographic Show, what would happen if you didn't eat for a week? Before we answer this question, let's first look at the recommended amount of food you should be eating in a normal day. Calories are used to measure the energy content of foods and beverages, and according to online health information website Healthline, the average woman needs to consume roughly 2,000 calories per day to maintain her weight and 1,500 calories per day to lose 1 pound of weight per week. The average man needs to consume around 2,500 calories per day to maintain his weight and 2,000 calories per day to lose 1 pound of weight per week. This is just a guide, and the actual amount depends on numerous factors like age, height, weight, and activity levels. So what does 2,000 or 2,500 calories look like in portions of food? Here are a few examples. A roasted chicken is 475 calories per leg. A 6-ounce salmon fillet is 350 calories. There are 489 calories per 100 grams of homemade granola, and a Starbucks double chocolatey chip frappuccino blended cream with whipped cream has a whopping 510 calories, so 4 of those a day and you'd be maxed out. Now that we have an idea of how much food we need and the calorie levels of some of the things we eat, let's see what happens if we cut out all these yummy delights and starve the body of fuel. For the first 6 hours with no food, everything is perfectly normal. Many people have gaps between meals of up to 6 hours on a typical day. The glycogen in your body, which is responsible for storing energy, is broken down through your metabolism to form glucose, the thing your body uses as fuel. Your brain uses 25% of this energy, with the rest being absorbed by your muscle tissues and red blood cells. But as soon as you get beyond 6 hours, the glycogen stores will be exhausted and hunger pains will kick in. As the brain runs out of energy, it can lead to some people getting moody and irrational unless they find their favorite snack fast. These feelings do not last long though, and your body adjusts and enters what is known as ketosis, a state at which the body starts breaking down your excess fat and converting it to energy. Ketosis is a state that a lot of athletes, such as marathon runners, enter when they run out of glycogen supplies. And there are also many popular low-carb diets that use ketosis to assist with weight loss. After 72 hours, things start to get very tricky, when your brain decides it needs more than just ketones to survive. At this stage, your body starts to break down its own proteins to form glucose, so your body is effectively eating its own muscle tissue to survive. And we're only 3 days in. Beyond this point, the immune system will start to struggle in the absence of important vitamins and minerals. This will make you more susceptible to illnesses and eventually death. As the body continues to eat itself until there is no fat, muscle, or glucose reserves left, the chances of heart attack due to severe heart tissue damage is heightened. This sounds pretty harsh and not advisable, but trying to predict how long these results will affect a person can vary depending on different factors. Someone with greater fat reserves will have a longer survival time, and most importantly, it matters how much water the body receives. Without fluids, most people will die within 10 days, but if fluids are kept in the diet, then a person can last from 20 to as long as 60 days without eating anything, though most human bodies will give up within 40 days. So what are some of the longest periods people have gone without food? We found the story of Rita Creighton, who was in her mid-50s when she and her husband got lost in the Nevada wilderness in the winter of 2011. Rita survived 49 days of starvation using melted snow to get liquid. She was fortunate to be discovered by some hunters who were taking advantage of the good weather after the winter. By the time she was found, she had lost nearly 30 pounds, and as she had not eaten for so long, she was unable to take food immediately. Her husband disappeared when he went off to try and find food and help. His body was discovered in 2012. Clearly, if you're planning any adventure trips, it's best to be properly prepared. British newspaper The Guardian quoted the couple's son Raymond as saying, "I don't believe they were prepared for winter weather, they don't go camping." Some of the longest periods that people go without food are hunger strikes, and none were longer than the case of an Indian national born in 1931, Bhagat Singh. At the time, the British ruled India, and Singh was part of the Indian independence movement, which saw him locked up in prison for allegedly murdering 2 people. When in prison, Singh undertook a hunger strike as a way to demand better clothing and hygiene standards and an ending of the manual labor duties at the prison. The British government tried to break the fast by placing bowls of food in his cell, but Singh was very determined and never touched any of it. Incredibly, he lasted 63 days, by which point he weighed only 119 pounds. Okay, so it seems that if the conditions are right, and if you have enough water, you can go without food for long periods of time. But is it ever healthy, or is it just downright dangerous? As it happens, fasting has become increasingly popular as a health routine in recent years. It's widely understood within the health community that there are many benefits to cutting out food for short periods of time, such as a few days. The obvious benefit is that it can support weight loss, if that's something your body requires. But other health benefits are said to include boosting your metabolism, lowering blood pressure, protecting your brain, and maybe even slowing the aging process. Though a lot of researchers all disagree with these theories.
You've been drinking coffee your entire adult life. Now you've decided to quit. At first, you breathe a sigh of relief, realizing that you are no longer reliant on the drug that is coffee. But this feeling doesn't last long. Your hands start to shake, you get a splitting headache, and you feel an uncontrollable urge to run to the nearest coffee shop and shoot caffeine straight into your veins. What actually happens when you stop drinking coffee? Let's find out. The reason coffee is so addictive isn't because of its taste, but because of a white, bitter chemical found in the coffee plant's beans. We are not talking about any illegal drugs here. Instead, we're referring to caffeine. The surprising thing is that the Food and Drug Administration actually classifies caffeine as an addictive drug. It just happens to be a legal one. Your body craves the substance once it becomes accustomed to it because caffeine causes higher concentrations of dopamine to build up in the brain due to its ability to block specific receptors. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that makes you feel happy. After you drink coffee, the caffeine enters the bloodstream via your stomach and small intestine. It is then carried around the body where it activates the pleasure centers of the brain. So basically, the caffeine in coffee is is tricking your body into producing chemicals that make you happy and more alert. This feeling is a good one, and therefore your body doesn't want to give it up so easily. But how quickly does it take for you to go into withdrawal after your final sip of coffee? And what long-term effects will it have on you? According to a study conducted in psychopharmacology that consisted of a compilation of 170 years of research, the symptoms of caffeine withdrawals can start as early as 12 hours after your last cup. And there is even worse news than that. All of the terrible feelings and changes to your body could persist for 9 days after your body is cut off from the drug. Unfortunately, some of the worst symptoms happen right away. Everyone is different and everyone's body responds differently to coffee withdrawals. However, we're about to take a journey through what will happen to most people who decide to stop drinking coffee cold turkey. Moments after your last sip of coffee, the liquid will descend down your esophagus and into your stomach. From there, some of the caffeine in the drink passes through your stomach lining and into your bloodstream. Seconds after that, the coffee will move into your small intestine, where the rest of the caffeine diffuses through the tissue and begins fully circulating around your body. It only takes a matter of minutes before this process is complete. This is why it only takes a few sips of coffee to help you feel awake. The highest caffeine levels your body will experience occur about an hour after you finish your cup of coffee. From then on, it'll all be downhill. After about an hour, your body slowly starts to use up all that caffeine that's circulating through your bloodstream. This is okay until your body realizes that it will not get a replenishment the next day. When you wake up on your first day without drinking coffee, you will feel groggy, but those nasty symptoms are just about to begin. As you walk into the kitchen and sit down to drink a glass of orange juice instead of your regular cup of coffee, you notice your hands are shaking. Actually, you might feel every part of your body begin to jitter. This is ironic because too much caffeine can cause the same symptoms due to the substance being a powerful stimulant that causes the nervous system to send signals through the body faster than usual. When this stimulant is removed, the same side effects can occur. Your body became so used to the extra boost caffeine gave that when the substance is removed, the nervous system slows down slightly, and the signals from the brain to the rest of the body are less constant. These signals will now be at the appropriate levels, so that's good. But your body is just not used to functioning without the help of coffee. This is one of the reasons why your first day without caffeine might start with the shakes. As you sit at the kitchen table, staring off into space, something begins to creep into the back of your brain. You're probably thinking of coffee and how you would give anything for just one sip. This is when you start to develop a headache. Besides increasing the concentration of dopamine in your body to make you feel happy, caffeine also tricks the brain into thinking there's an emergency, which some scientists think might cause adrenaline to be released. This is another reason why coffee makes you feel so awake. But the unfortunate thing is that once the body gets used to an influx in these chemicals, it starts to crave them. Without its daily dose of caffeine, the body does something strange. Instead of maintaining normal hormone levels, your body begins dumping adenosine into the bloodstream. This is a chemical that signals the body it needs rest or sleep. This change in brain chemistry is what causes caffeine withdrawal headaches to develop. Another change that happens the morning after you've given up coffee is that your blood vessels start to enlarge. This is actually a good thing because it means more oxygen can flow to the brain. However, since your body has become accustomed to shrunken blood vessels as a result of drinking coffee, the return back to normal can be painful. In fact, caffeine can reduce the blood flow to the brain by as much as 27%, which means once it's out of your system, your blood flow can increase by the same figure. This would be a shock to your system. When caffeine causes the blood vessels to narrow, your body increases the number of adenosine receptors on the blood cells, which helps them become enlarged. However, caffeine binds to those same receptors, resulting in the blood cells shrinking. When the caffeine is finally out of your system, the cells still have the extra receptors, but no caffeine to block them, meaning the blood vessels swell. The rapid shift between not getting enough blood flow because of the caffeine to getting too much blood flow can lead to withdrawal headaches the day after you stop drinking coffee. Unfortunately, this symptom can persist for the next several days. After your seething headache starts to subside, you'll notice something odd about your morning constitutional. If you regularly evacuate your bowels after your morning coffee, you are not alone. This is because the caffeine in it can actually cause contractions in the stomach, intestines, and colon that signal the body it is time to poop. For people who want to stay regular, this can be incredibly helpful, but now that you stopped drinking coffee, you might feel backed up. Caffeine also blocks the antidiuretic hormone produced in the pituitary gland, which signals the body that it's more hydrated than it actually is. This can lead to the urge to urinate more frequently while drinking coffee as well. However, on your first day off that brown liquid, your body becomes confused. Your hormones are out of whack, and the body is storing all the fluids and solids it would normally excrete after your morning cup of coffee. The crazy thing is that coffee can cause the body to start preparing itself to go to the bathroom in as little as a few minutes after drinking it. Unfortunately, your first day not drinking coffee will be filled with bathroom frustrations, as you will probably be constipated for most of the day. Besides having bathroom problems, you'll also have concentration problems your first few days after cutting coffee out of your life. As you try to make it through your first workday without coffee, you'll find that you are less productive. This is because your brain is not being filled with dopamine like normal, and there's a buildup of adenosine, a hormone that makes you drowsy. It'll be a struggle to stay focused and get anything done during your first day of work without coffee, but there is even worse news. The next day, you'll probably be just as unproductive. Your body's become so accustomed to the jolt of energy that's given by a cup of coffee that it'll not be able to recover in just a day or two. You could end up feeling a lack of productivity for the entire week. Luckily, there's also good news. In several research studies, it was found that after people got over their caffeine withdrawal, their productivity exceeded what it was before. This is because caffeine might give some more focus when consumed daily, but is artificial. When the body's allowed to operate at optimum levels without the aid of an outside drug, you can be more productive for longer periods of time. You're almost through your first day of no coffee, and it's become brutal. Unfortunately, there are even worse side effects to come. As you progress through the day, you'll find yourself getting annoyed more easily and irritated by the littlest things. This is just another side effect of all the changes occurring in your body. The imbalance of hormones, feelings of being tired, lack of energy will make you wish you could curl up in a ball and just sleep until your body's passed through the withdrawal stages. Along with being irritable, you'll become more and more anxious as well. However, like most of the side effects of coffee, this too will pass and could even be better for your health. The anxiousness comes from an imbalance in all the chemicals mentioned before, along with norepinephrine and glutamate. These two are especially responsible for that anxious feeling lingering in your brain. Unfortunately, even sleep won't help you at this point. You lie in bed staring at the ceiling hoping for rest to come. You expect that since you've been tired all day, you'd just be able to pass right out. But this isn't the case. Your body is struggling to regain some form of the normalcy it had before you made coffee a regular part of your life. Unfortunately, a byproduct of this process is lack of sleep. Your first night since you stopped drinking coffee will likely be restless as you toss and turn trying to will your body to fall asleep. This is part of the addiction recovery process because even though you might have decided to give up coffee, your body's chemical processes are not yet on board. Hormone levels are still out of balance. The brain is desperately trying to cope with the chemical changes associated with the lack of caffeine throughout the day. Eventually, you'll doze off, but since you probably didn't sleep great, the second day of no coffee will be worse than the first. You will wake up even more tired than the day before. All of those withdrawal symptoms from the previous day will likely persist, along with some new ones. Countless studies have found that the main symptom someone feels after giving up coffee is fatigue. This is kind of interesting because contrary to popular belief, coffee doesn't actually give you much energy at all. It's the way it throws your body's internal chemistry into controlled chaos that tricks you into thinking you have more energy when you drink coffee. Coffee only has around 1 calorie per cup, and since calories are the measurement of energy contained in food and drinks, it's clear that coffee does not give you much energy at all. On average, 1 egg contains around 78 calories, which means you need to drink 78 cups of coffee in order to get the same amount of energy from eating a single egg. This would be incredibly damaging to your health, so please do not try this. As day 2 progresses without coffee, you may start to feel depressed. Dopamine, glutamate, and norepinephrine are all chemicals that help you regulate your mood. Caffeine in coffee throws all of them out of balance. Since your body's trying to compensate for the lack of caffeine in your system, it can overcompensate when trying to regulate these hormones and return them back to normal levels. The withdrawal process can also exacerbate symptoms for people who have been diagnosed with a mood disorder. This is why you might feel sad for a few days after you stop drinking coffee. Some studies even claim that long-term coffee drinkers are more at risk of developing mood disorders, such as depression, because of the fundamental changes caffeine can make to the brain's chemistry. So once you start drinking coffee, sadness may be in your future. As you progress through day 2 of no coffee, you will likely feel tired, irritable, and sad all at the same time. But you know you just need to power through, and greener pastures are on the other side. A few days after you give up coffee, you might notice your blood pressure going down. This comes with all sorts of perks. Lower blood pressure is connected to lower stress and anxiety, so after a few days of going through caffeine withdrawal hell, you'll start to see some positive benefits in your body. The caffeine in coffee can cause an increase in blood pressure. It can also trick the body into going into fight or flight mode. An increase in blood pressure for a short amount of time is beneficial when trying to fight off an attack or run away from a predator because it allows more oxygen to circulate to your muscles. However, constantly having high blood pressure can be detrimental to your health. It has even been linked to an increased chance of heart attack or stroke. Less than a week after quitting coffee, your body will begin to adjust to the reduced amount of adrenaline and caffeine in the body. This will cause your blood pressure to decrease to more sustainable levels. A week or so after you stop drinking coffee, the withdrawal symptoms should be almost completely gone, or at least much more manageable. If they're not, it could mean you were drinking way too much coffee. Once you start feeling better, you might find yourself smiling more, which is a good thing because a week or two after you stop drinking coffee, your teeth will start to gain back some of their original color. Coffee is acidic. which means it can stain or damage your teeth. Once you stop consuming the brown liquid, your body can get to work on repairing the damage it's done. Coffee causes the saliva in your mouth to dry out, which normally protects the teeth from enamel buildup. This, along with the acidity, can cause lasting damage. Coffee also contains tannins, which can cause the color from different foods and drinks to stick to the teeth and stain them even more. Interestingly, it's been found that brushing your teeth right after drinking coffee will only exacerbate the problem as it spreads around the acids and compounds that stain your teeth, rather than removing them. Therefore, it's recommended you wait 30 minutes after drinking coffee to brush your teeth. Now that you quit drinking this stuff altogether, your teeth are thanking you, and you'll notice that brownish color associated with coffee-stained teeth is beginning to lighten. In the next week or two, your teeth might even be noticeably brighter. After weeks of fine-tuning, your body chemistry is almost completely back to normal. Without the side effects of caffeine withdrawal, you'll get a good night's sleep practically every night. Your brain can now more consciously spend time in slow wave and REM sleep, which are part of its restoration process. You'll also find that you need to use the bathroom less, which allows you to sleep soundly through the night. And if you usually had a cup of coffee in the afternoon or early evening just to give yourself that one last jolt before the end of the day, these effects will be even more noticeable. Studies have shown that drinking coffee even 6 hours before going to sleep can severely disrupt the sleep cycle, not to mention making it harder to fall asleep initially. This is because the lingering caffeine in your system is enough to trick your body into thinking it should be alert rather than resting. 2 weeks after you stop drinking coffee, you'll feel like a new person, or at least the person you were before becoming addicted to the stuff. It's interesting to note that although many people drink coffee to wake up in the morning, studies have shown that once coffee is removed from someone's daily routine, they tend to feel better rested and more awake than they did when they still drank the caffeinated beverage. This is likely because there is no substitute for a good night's rest and taking care of yourself. You've now reached the long-term effects of cutting coffee out of your life. You've suffered through caffeine withdrawal, mood swings, and the readjustment of your chemical composition. You're now enjoying some of the perks associated with a coffee-free lifestyle. But how will this decision affect you in the long run? It's been several weeks since your last cup of coffee, and you're feeling good. There's a biological reason for this. For as long as you've been drinking coffee, your body has been thrown out of homeostasis by the addictive caffeine compound. Now that it's been flushed from your system, your hormone levels are completely back to normal. Returning to normal hormone levels has been found to be especially beneficial in women, as the caffeine in coffee can throw their estrogen levels out of whack. In some women, caffeine can decrease the amount of estrogen in the body. This can lead to hot flashes, mood swings, and lowered sex drive. These aren't life-threatening conditions, but can definitely cause stress, especially if the coffee drinker doesn't know why it's happening. In other women, caffeine can increase the amount of estrogen produced, causing more severe PMS, depression, and non-cancerous lumps on the breasts and uterus. Now that the amount of caffeine ingested has been reduced over several weeks, estrogen levels are back to normal. To be clear, caffeine consumption for both men and women affects hormone levels. The longer you go without a cup of coffee, the better you will feel. There's no doubt that the days or even weeks of withdrawal sucks, but you will feel so much better in the long run. It's also been found that people who stop drinking coffee can lose weight in the weeks after they kick the habit. The reason for this is most likely connected to the substances added to the coffee, such as milk and sugar, rather than the coffee itself. A Duke University study showed that coffee, along with other caffeinated drinks, increases a person's daily sugar intake by about 10%. Now that you've removed coffee from your diet, your body is using more stored fats instead of burning the extra sugars that are in your morning beverage. This could cause you to lose weight and feel better all at the same time. However, there is something everyone should be aware of when they stop drinking coffee. Although there are benefits, and for many people they may experience weight loss, there's a chance you may gain weight instead. Coffee can suppress your appetite without you even realizing it. This means that after your body recovers from the initial shock of being deprived of caffeine, you might have a bigger appetite each morning. There are a couple of reasons for this. In the early days, when your body was still craving caffeine, you might have tried to fix the problem by consuming sugar in the form of donuts or cookies. However, as time progressed, you may begin to realize that you should have been having a bigger breakfast every morning and that coffee was tricking your body into thinking it was full when it was not. There's some important thing to learn from this. After a few weeks of not drinking coffee, you might realize you're hungrier than you were previously. This is just your body telling you that you should be taking in more calories. It doesn't mean that you should be loading up on sugary foods, but that your morning routine should be filled with more fruits and cereals instead of an addictive drug found in a hot beverage. This could in turn cause you to gain some weight, but perhaps that's okay. Just because you gain a little weight from eating a bigger, healthier breakfast instead of skipping the meal for a cup of coffee doesn't mean you should panic. Maybe now that you're feeling better overall, you'll have more time for exercise or to pursue other activities. This could lead to you dropping whatever weight you gained while also living a healthier life. One of the most pleasing results you might see after a few weeks of no coffee could be a younger you. That's right, research suggests that removing coffee from your daily routine could result in healthier skin. Your body is no longer under the influence of the diuretic tendencies of caffeine, so it's retaining drinking more water. This is not only good for your internal processes, but for your skin as well. Now that you're sleeping better, less anxious, and have healthier skin, your body seems to go back in time. You aren't actually becoming younger, but the damage coffee and caffeine cause to your skin and your body is almost completely reversed. One study concluded that the caffeine in coffee prevented skin cells from producing collagen. This protein gives your skin its structure and aids in repairing damage to cells, helping you maintain a more youthful look. There also might be a connection between caffeine and the disruption of DNA synthesis in skin cells. If this is true, removing coffee from your daily life could allow skin cells to multiply more efficiently. The benefits of reducing the amount of coffee you consume or giving it up completely are numerous. However, most things in moderation tend to be okay. One rumor that many people have heard about drinking coffee is that it can stunt your growth or cause bone loss. But is there any actual truth to this? The answer might surprise you. According to the National Institutes of Health's Office of Dietary Supplements and Harvard Health Publishing, there's evidence that the caffeine in coffee can affect your bones. So after you stop drinking coffee, will your bones become stronger? The answer is no. According to scientists, caffeine in coffee can increase calcium excretion and reduce absorption, but not by any significant amount. The total amount of calcium lost from drinking coffee is around 2 to 3 milligrams in someone's lifetime and has no ill effects on growth. The prevalence of this myth is actually a perfect example of correlation not meaning causation. The research studies found that people who drank more coffee tended to drink less milk and other beverages that contained calcium. The lack of calcium-rich drinks led to weaker bones, not the coffee itself. Therefore, doctors warn that if you stop drinking coffee, it will not help your bones become stronger. However, they do recommend replacing coffee with a beverage that's rich in calcium and vitamin D, which will most certainly help you build stronger bones and prevent osteoporosis. What it comes down to is that removing coffee from your life will make you feel awful at first, but it's better in the long run. That being said, studies show the average American consumes 200 milligrams of caffeine a day between the food they eat and the liquids they drink. This is a little much, but probably won't kill you. However, if you take in 600 milligrams or the equivalent of 4 cups of coffee in a day, it could cause serious health problems. If this is you, it might be time to remove the addictive substance from your daily routine.
Have you ever suffered from insomnia? Twisting and turning between the sheets until you see the light peeking through the curtains and you think, damn, today is not going to be easy? For most people who go without sleep for just one night, the next day everything seems a bit out of whack. Imagine that lasted another day, and another day. That's what we're going to discuss in this episode of the Infographic Show, What If You Never Fell Asleep Again? Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell button so that you can be part of a notification squad. Let's start with day 1 of no sleep. What exactly happens to you? According to one study that tested volunteers' brain patterns after a sleepless night, the deprivation led to what is called fractional anisotropy. In layman's terms, this means sleeplessness affects neural functions and in the short term can affect your emotions as well as your ability to think straight. One sleep expert, Dr. Fred Merkala, says going without just one night's sleep can affect the brain the same way alcohol does, by creating mental confusion. He also says that going just 24 hours without sleep can result in hallucinations, paranoia, and even sleep deprivation psychosis. The Journal of Neuroscience says this can feel like suffering from schizophrenia for some people, while others deal with a 24-hour wake binge much better. If one night can be that bad, what about 2 nights? Most scientists that study sleep deprivation say you lose 25% of brain performance for every 24 hours you don't sleep. If after 24 hours you feel muddled and a little off kilter, a report by the US National Institute of Health says that after 39 hours your heart rate and blood pressure will be affected. At this point you may have all the symptoms above, but according to research, there is a good chance you'll have trouble remembering some people's faces. After 48 hours, the body's immune system starts to falter due to a decrease in your body's natural killer cells, aka NK cells. These are the cells that fight off disease. The study abstract concludes, not surprisingly, that sleep restriction produces physiological consequences that may be unhealthy. Nitrogen was also found in the urine of the test patients, which also usually means your body is undergoing some kind of stress. It's also proven that your hormones will be affected, so there's a chance you might get all emotional or just fly off the handle. Your hearing as well as hand-eye coordination will be affected, and so will your ability to judge situations. According to the International Journal of Occupational Medicine and Environmental Health, don't drive a car at this point or start doing some metal work. You may just start using a kind of autopilot too, meaning you get from A to B and don't remember what happened in between. As for the mind, on one particular web forum, a high school student says he went to school after 48 hours of no sleep and ended up sitting down on a bench and chatting with another boy. When he noticed the concerned teacher looking at him, he then realized there was no boy there. He had been hallucinating. In an article by Everyday Health, it states at 48 hours you will also start having microsleeps. These can last between half a second to half a minute, and you won't even know you've had them. Other research says that you are not actually hallucinating, but dreaming during wakefulness. This is something that has been called sleep insanity. At 72 hours, things get really weird. When interviewed, one soldier who experienced days without sleep said even just talking to someone can be really hard. He also said he'd see things in the trees, such as people approaching his camp. It's interesting to note here that during Navy SEAL training there is something called Hell Week, wherein trainees have to stay awake for as long as they can and actually do things. According to the Navy SEALs website, only 25% of people get through Hell Week, but it does seem they can catch at least a couple of Z's now and again. Unless under lab conditions or being tortured, we will all have these microsleeps or blackouts. As for torture, the Senate Committee's 2014 report on the CIA's use of sleep deprivation after 9/11 found that depriving people of sleep made them say just about anything, including false confessions. The report said some detainees were sleep deprived for as long as 180 hours, which resulted in them being put under tremendous physical and emotional stress, as well as experiencing disturbing hallucinations. Amnesty International calls it cruel and inhumane, not only for what happens psychologically, but also the stress that is put on the body. The record for not sleeping without the use of stimulants is held by Randy Gardner, and he managed 11 days, 25 minutes in 1964. He suffered from concentration problems, short-term memory loss, paranoia, and hallucinations. Claims have been made for longer sleeps, but none have been scientifically verified. If you are unfortunate enough to suffer from the disease fatal familial insomnia, you will not sleep, and as the name suggests, you will die within months, but not before you go crazy. No one has ever just stayed awake, as it is thought to be simply impossible. You will just start having microsleeps. We don't know what would happen to someone who never sleeps again, because the body, thank goodness, just won't let that happen.
If you eat leftovers, you will die. You could of course also be perfectly fine and suffered no ill effects whatsoever. But unbeknownst to millions of people all over the world, last night's harmless leftover steak and potatoes can harbor secret threats. And yes, a chance that you could actually die. All because you decided to skip the rest of your main course and dive straight into dessert. But why are leftovers so potentially dangerous? And what foods are more dangerous than others? Stay tuned as we explore why and how cold potatoes can and will end your life. From the moment a searing steak leaves the pan and hits your plate, bacteria start to invade it and multiply at alarming rates. You may keep a spick-and-span kitchen, but germs are a persistent bunch and can survive even harsh cleaning chemicals. Also, countless studies have shown that most people don't wash their hands nearly thoroughly enough to make a dent in the populations of bacteria happily making your digits their home and hearth. What's all that really mean though? Well, you know that plate you hand-washed? Soap alone without appropriate friction is pretty lousy at killing off bacteria. So odds are that with the lazy 2 or 3 passes you gave it with the sponge, most of the bacteria that were feasting on your leftovers are still there. Your sponge itself, by the way, is practically bacteria nirvana. And most dish sponges are teeming with all sorts of stupidly dangerous bacteria. Every time you wipe your plate with a dirty sponge, you're less cleaning it and more simply smearing more harmful bacteria around, ensuring that they'll find their way onto your food and into your body. Then of course there's your filthy hands and the billions of germs they come into contact with every day on various surfaces. Be honest with yourself. When's the last time you washed your hands before eating? We thought so. Keep that in mind next time you're chowing down on a burger at a restaurant, and reach for that same sticky bottle of ketchup hundreds of people before you have manhandled before going back to pawing their burger buns. Scientists caution that you should limit the amount of time food is in the danger zone, or between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. These are the temperatures in which bacteria grow best, and every second your food spends in this danger zone is more bacteria you'll soon be ingesting. Our advice is to simply flip food straight from the red-hot pan and into your mouth to be safe. The searing burns you'll receive will destroy the bacteria that are already inside your mouth and throat, because yes, harmful bacteria even live there. See, even your own insides aren't safe. But suppose you're like most people and enjoy a leisurely meal while watching another new episode of Stranger Things, and then after you're done eating you realize you have plenty left over for tomorrow. In that case, you probably do like just about any normal person and stick the leftovers in Tupperware or perhaps wrap them in plastic wrap and stick them in the fridge. Congratulations! Now you're probably going to die. But wait, because if you must eat leftovers, then there's ways to make sure that you limit the hazards of spoiled food. First, you should be aware that the fabled smell or taste test are not a valid means of ascertaining if food is still good to eat. Most bacteria simply don't smell or taste like anything, even in really large numbers. And so food that smells, looks, and tastes perfectly fine could be in fact teeming with bacteria waiting to murder you. The FDA recommends that you keep leftovers for no more than 4 days, after which even if they're kept refrigerated, they should be tossed out. If you freeze food, you can safely do so for 3 months, after which the bacteria society will have acclimated to an Ice Age civilization and begun to thrive once more. Actually, no, it's because generally speaking, food tastes terrible after 3 months. Though many sources warn about the dangers of eating food frozen for too long, we're gonna call BS on that, seeing as on January 17, 1951, attendees to the Explorers Club's 47th annual dinner ate 250,000-year-old mammoth that had been frozen in permafrost. If you insist on gambling with your life and eating leftover food though, the most important thing to remember is to cook your food until it reaches an internal temperature of at least 165 degrees Fahrenheit to ensure you kill off any surviving bacteria. If cooking in a microwave, remember to turn your food regularly and even flip it to ensure that it gets cooked regularly. Slow cookers such as crockpots are very bad ideas for reheating leftovers, as they often won't heat food hot enough to actually kill bacteria. But what kinds of food should you never reheat? Aside from all of them, the following are particularly risky. Potatoes are pretty much the best vegetable in the world. It makes up the better half of burgers and fries and can be fried, baked, mashed, steamed, and seared without tasting terrible. Unfortunately, potatoes are not as friendly as they seem, and for centuries, they've been plotting their slow revenge on mankind for the way we dump their brethren into pots full of hot oil and baking ovens every day. While a normal uncooked potato is pretty harmless, once potatoes that are cooked are left to cool at room temperature, they can begin to form the bacteria which causes botulism. And this is especially true if you wrap the potato up tightly in foil so as to keep oxygen out. Botulism can be so resilient that even reheating the potato may not be enough to kill the bacteria off. Next time you decide to go out for dinner, we recommend you order the French fries, because it's us or them, and we have to eat them all before they wipe humanity out once and for all. Most people love having mushrooms on their pizza, and these people are not your friends because fungus is not a food. However, if you happen to be a filthy fungus eater, you should be aware that after cooking mushrooms and then leaving them to sit at room temperature, proteins in the mushroom can be damaged and broken down by enzymes and bacteria. This can give you a pretty upset stomach, which isn't as metal as potatoes literally breeding botulism to try and kill you before you can eat them, but still unpleasant. Chicken is great for your health, and every doctor will recommend a healthy chicken diet over consuming lots of red meat. Yet, when it comes to reheating, chicken is an absolute nightmare of bacterial overgrowth. If you do reheat chicken, you must ensure that it's evenly heated to at least 175 degrees, and it must never have been allowed to dip above 42 degrees while stored in the refrigerator. If your chicken has been stored for longer than 3 days, just forget about it and toss it. Scientists are unsure why chicken is so dangerous compared to other meats, but have agreed it's probably due to the same glitch in the matrix that causes most foods to taste like chicken because the machines have no taste buds. Chicken clearly is out to murder us, and its attempts to end mankind begin even before it's hatched out of its egg. The FDA recommends that you never leave cooked eggs out of the refrigerator for more than 2 hours, or 1 hour in hot weather. Salmonella multiplies stupidly fast in eggs and can leave you with a serious case of the Hershey squirts, or even be fatal. The 2-hour, 1-hour rule, by the way, applies to any dish with egg in it, to include quiche and even casserole. Salmonella doesn't discriminate. If a dish has so much as a hint of egg in it, it's going to jump right in and start binary fissioning all over the place. That's the asexual process of bacterial reproduction, by the way. So next time you're staying at a hotel and they have eggs on offer at the breakfast buffet, just skip on them and then call the police, because that hotel just tried to kill you. Who hasn't reheated Chinese food leftovers in their day? Well, people who don't want to die, that's who. It turns out that rice is also extremely hazardous to your health if eaten as a leftover, and that's because cooked rice can become contaminated by a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. While the bacteria itself can be destroyed with appropriate heating, it's able to produce spores that are very heat resistant and toxic to consume. So while you may have killed off the actual bacteria, their children are hidden amongst your rice grains, waiting to wreak revenge upon you for the deaths of their fathers. Sort of like a food Taliban, if you will. If you have to eat leftover rice, make sure that you reheat it thoroughly. And if microwaving, that means taking it out, stirring it up, and sending it in for another round of microwave radiation. But let's be real. You know you have literally never done that before in your life because nobody does. We just scarf down the boiling hot food at the top of our dish and try to mix it with the freezing cold food at the bottom. Ain't nobody got time for proper food reheating techniques. But you should make the time, because after you die due to food poisoning, you'll definitely not have the time. If chicken is bad, seafood is worse. In fact, the FDA recommends that you immediately toss out seafood if it's been left out for more than 2 hours in cool weather or 1 hour in warm weather. Turns out the bacteria absolutely love growing on seafood. And unless the fish or shrimp you're enjoying was caught and then immediately frozen, you're probably in for a very long stay in the bathroom if you try to reheat old seafood. Even worse, it's basically impossible to tell when the seafood has gone bad because, well, it always smells like it's gone bad, even when fresh. Take it from us, and just stick to eating land animals. Man was never meant to enter the briny depths of Poseidon's realm, and doing so is likely to end up with the mighty god of the seas smiting you with explosive diarrhea. Most of the food we've featured in this episode has been meats, which probably leaves plenty of you vegetarians feeling pretty self-satisfied at your lifestyle choice right now, convinced of your own immortality versus carnivores. Well, you leaf eaters should think twice, because it turns out that reheating root and leafy vegetables is potentially just as, if not more fatal than reheating old chicken. Spinach, lettuce, cress, and celery, to name a few, are vegetables rich in nitrates, which happen to be pretty good for the body. However, when you reheat one of these vegetables, the nitrates can convert into nitrosamines, and these are well-documented carcinogens. Sure, old chicken could make you spend the next day and a half on the toilet, but spinach will straight up give you cancer if you reheat it. Think you're safe because you only eat kale and sunshine? Think again. Not only does kale taste terrible, but it also is silently biding its time, waiting for you to make the mistake of reheating it as leftovers, so it can unleash deadly carcinogens into your body. It turns out that eating leftover food is a pretty terrible idea, and some everyday dishes that we never thought of as harmful can be pretty deadly even if properly reheated. After watching this episode, we wouldn't blame you if you opted to never eat leftovers again, but then again, everybody knows that day-old pizza is the best. While one takeaway from today's episode is that we should only cook or order enough food to satisfy a normal-sized appetite and not gorge ourselves on dangerous leftovers afterwards, another is that food is dangerous and constantly trying to kill us, so we should eat as much of it as possible because at this point it's either us or the food. This planet isn't big enough for both of us.
Order in the court. Today we're putting Sweet Mary Jane on trial. Her other aliases include cannabis, weed, grass, hash, and ganja. She's said by some to be an unfairly maligned miracle cure to a whole bunch of different illnesses, while others accuse her of being an express trip to becoming a burnout with anxiety and lung problems. So, what's the truth? Is weed good for you, bad for you, or somewhere in between? We're going to hear arguments from both the defense and the prosecution, so pay close attention. Only you can decide if this plant is innocent or guilty. Let's hear the evidence. How exactly does weed operate? And we'll be talking about smoking it today, so let's not worry about oils or edibles. When you smoke weed, you inhale the smoke down into your lungs, where the chemicals pass through the alveoli, the 480 million tiny air pockets that you're liable to find in there, and straight into the bloodstream. The bloodstream is the express line straight to your brain, where the real magic happens. The body's got an endocannabinoid system. That's a fancy name for the network of neurotransmitters known as cannabinoid receptors attached to all of the neurons in your brain. These use chemicals like anandamide to communicate chemical signals in the body. The anandamide has an uncanny similarity to THC, the psychoactive chemical in our defendant today. In sliding on in and attaching itself to the brain's cannabinoid receptors, it hijacks several key systems in the brain and the nervous system to produce its distinctive effect, including the hippocampus, the orbitofrontal cortex, the hypothalamus, the basal ganglia, and the cerebellum. The most important to the average cannabis user is its effects on the brain's reward system, in the amygdala and the ventral striatum. It induces the body to release spurts of dopamine, the neurochemical that gives you pleasurable feelings after activities like exercise, good food, and even sex. And studies show that the dopamine released as a result of THC is even more intense than the regular batch. So we know why it makes you feel good, but so does beer and chocolate cake, and no sane person is ever going to argue that those are any good for you. So now we have the proper context. Let's hear the back and forth arguments. Is it a net good or a net bad to take up smoking the devil's lettuce? Before we get into the specifics of the body, let's talk about the effects cannabis use can have on your mental health. Starting with the defense. Many weed users will be quick to tell you that their habitual pot smoking helps regulate their mental health, taking the edge off anxiety and mitigating depression. CBD and low doses of THC have been shown to reduce anxiety in some smokers due to its effects on the brain's limbic system. In some cases, it's also been shown to reduce the frequency of panic attacks in people suffering from PTSD. However, the prosecution would have a strong case in saying that this is a double-edged sword. The effects of THC in particular can be vastly different from person to person and in some cases have some seriously detrimental effects on the user's mental health. For some people suffering from bipolar disorder, habitual weed smoking can make their symptoms worse. But don't worry if you don't already have bipolar disorder, there isn't any evidence that smoking weed will give it to you. However, that doesn't mean that chronic weed smoking might not open the door to other mental health struggles. In some users, because of chronic weed use's effects on their neural reward pathways, they might require more significant quantities of dopamine in order to stay at baseline level of emotion, resulting in depressive episodes. These reward pathway issues might also result in feelings of listlessness, low energy, and an inability to feel motivated. And while weed relieves anxiety for some, it has the opposite effect in others, causing edginess, irritability, and paranoia. Because of the psychoactive effects of THC, some brains predisposed to psychotic symptoms may see these exacerbated by habitual cannabis use. If a user is predisposed to developing schizophrenia, then smoking weed might push them in the wrong direction, increasing their risk of psychotic episodes. This is particularly true of people who started smoking weed too young. But what about sleep? Sleep assistance is touted as one of the benefits of marijuana, but does the science stack up? First, the defense. In the short term, weed seems to have this one because it suppresses physical arousal and promotes the creation of the neurological chemical adenosine. Weed can make the user feel pleasantly sleepy, though CBD is by far a more active part of the process than THC. Short-term weed use is believed to allow the user to spend more time in deep sleep, which will leave them feeling more refreshed when they wake up. However, this comes at the cost of spending less time in REM, or rapid eye movement sleep. This is the part of the sleep cycle where the brain processes emotions, encodes your memories, and allows you to dream. This is a huge benefit to people who take weed to alleviate their PTSD symptoms, as this will reduce the time they spend experiencing nightmares and stop their traumatic memories from being cemented too deeply into their minds. Some have even reported that using synthetic cannabis medication has reduced both nightmares and daytime flashbacks. However, there's a reason we stressed "in the short term" earlier. The prosecution can argue that long-term cannabis use actually makes sleep harder, as the body can become accustomed to weed's sedative effects, meaning that the person is forced to either take more or stronger cannabis strains in order to achieve the same effects. In turn, this could lead to side effects like less overall sleep, less time in deep sleep, longer time to falling asleep, and frequent nighttime wakings. High doses of THC before bed can also lead to side effects the next day, including lapses in memory and sleepiness. And if you decide to stop taking cannabis after a long period of doing so, you might experience cannabis withdrawals, which ironically can cause both insomnia and strange dreams, bringing you right back to square one. If you're an aspiring athlete, the science says that taking up habitual weed smoking probably isn't the best interest of your career aspirations, and for more reasons than the extremely frequent drug testing in the athletic field. Long-term marijuana use has been linked with a decrease in reflexes and reaction times, as well as physical coordination, owing to weed's depressant effect on the cerebellum and the basal ganglia. For that very same reason, you shouldn't even think about driving while under the influence of weed. Not only is it illegal, but your impaired judgment and motor control will also make it incredibly dangerous. So that's a strong point in favor of the prosecution. One of the most critical areas for discussion of the benefits versus drawbacks of smoking weed is pain management. A considerable number of medical or even self-medicating cannabis users do so to mitigate chronic pain, and it's often touted as one of the significant benefits of marijuana use. So do these claims hold up to scrutiny? Much like how cannabinoids alter the function of the reward pathways in our brain, they do similar things to the brain's processing of pain. It's why marijuana and CBD have been useful for people self-medicating against the effects of conditions like fibromyalgia, endometriosis, and chronic migraines. And any way you slice it, cannabis is undeniably a less risky form of pain relief than opioids, which pose both a greater risk of overdose and developing addiction. In addition to its effects on chronic pain, weed has often been praised for its anti-inflammatory properties. Studies have found that by targeting A3 glycine receptors, cannabinoids have been effective in treating inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, and even some severe autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis. Decreasing inflammation in the body also benefits general health, so there's no complaints here. If you suffer from glaucoma, where vision is lost due to an increase in intraocular pressure on the optic nerve, weed has also been shown to reduce the severity of symptoms, and it's been a cause for medical marijuana usage for quite some time. Studies have shown that smoking weed can also be helpful in mitigating the worst effects of a number of serious diseases. One of the most prominent ones is multiple sclerosis, MS, an autoimmune disease that corrodes the insulating covers of the nerve cells and slowly debilitates the sufferer. There's an oral cannabinoid spray called Sativex that has been approved for treating multiple sclerosis spasticity in 25 different countries, and it's been found to relieve stiffness and spasming in adult patients who haven't been responding to other treatments. However, in some cases, this has been shown to have the side effect of inducing depressive episodes in patients. So, like with many medications, its use is best judged on a case-by-case basis to achieve the optimum results. Weed's tendency to counteract spasticity has also made it a useful tool for epilepsy patients looking to mitigate their seizures. Specifically, cannabinoid medication has been shown to be effective against two specific subtypes of epilepsy: Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and Dravet syndrome. But we're not just talking about treating epilepsy with a blunt. CBD, the other active ingredient in cannabis aside from THC, has been shown to have the most beneficial effects. That's why the cannabinoid in question, Epidiolex, is a highly purified form of CBD. This, however, doesn't come without side effects, including liver damage and suicidal ideation. Once again, there are no silver bullet miracle cures here. Something rarely discussed about weed use is its negative effect on cardiovascular health in those who already suffer from heart disease. Because of weed's tendency to raise the heart rate, dilate blood vessels, and make the heart pump harder, which is incidentally why you feel your heart pounding in your chest while undergoing a weed-induced panic attack. Because of these effects on the heart, people with heart issues are likely to experience greater chest pains if they're also habitual cannabis smokers. In some edge cases, there have been links drawn between marijuana use and increased risks of heart attack, especially among those who are already predisposed to heart attacks due to pre-existing conditions. Cannabis use is definitely more problematic among certain high-risk groups, including all the ones we discussed before, and of course, children and pregnant women. For pregnant women, the risk posed is mainly to the healthy development of the fetus. Strains of cannabis with THC can even damage a baby's development from breastfeeding from a habitual user. Pregnant women who are habitual users of high THC marijuana are 2.3 times more likely to experience a stillbirth, according to some studies. Some reports have also indicated that pregnant mothers smoking marijuana leads to lower birth weights, much like regular tobacco use. Children of chronic marijuana users are also far more likely to experience developmental issues growing up. This brings us to the risks present in younger people smoking weed. Strains of high THC cannabis have been known to stunt the cognitive development of young users, impairing both attention and memory and leading to weaker work or school performance later in life. Some studies have even found premature marijuana use to be a risk factor for developing dependency in adulthood. And of course, a contentious point of argument for both sides: cancer, the so-called emperor of maladies, killing almost 10 million people per year and ruining the lives of many more. Proponents of cannabis say that it can relieve some of cancer's worst effects. Critics will say it makes it worse. Let's take a look at the science. One thing we should probably get out of the way first is, no, smoking weed cannot cure cancer. That would be a pretty horrific oversimplification of cancer and weed's effects on it. While nobody should jump to conclusions on the human side of things here, there have been some extremely promising studies involving cannabinoid cancer treatments in animals. Some cannabinoid compounds have even successfully slowed the growth or even killed off cancer cells in petri dish tests. But again, these small successes in animals and lab conditions would still mean applying any of those advancements to humans would be years off if they came through at all. Regardless of any effects weed may or may not have on cancer itself, the science is in on some types of cannabis helping to relieve the worst kinds of chemotherapy side effects. The United States Food and Drug Administration has approved 2 different synthetic cannabinoids, dronabinol and nabilone, to take the edge off of the nausea and vomiting that's often caused by chemotherapy treatment. For some undergoing chemotherapy, there's an even more unpleasant side effect: peripheral neuropathy, a form of nerve damage that affects the nerves outside of the brain and the spinal column. It can result in tingling, burning sensations, numbness, weakness, and cramps in the hands and feet. Some studies have shown that smoking or vaping weed is able to ease neuropathic pain in chemotherapy patients, so it is a common form of self-medication. Studies have also shown that weed can counteract the appetite suppressant effects experienced by some chemotherapy patients, as well as people suffering from HIV and AIDS. Normally, people find the appetite increase caused by weed to be a detrimental effect, but for some people experiencing dangerous weight loss as a result of their illness or treatment for their illness, it is a godsend. The American Cancer Society has urged further research into the relationship between cannabinoids and cancer treatment, seeing as doctors and scientists are always looking to add new potential weapons to their arsenal in the seemingly endless fight against cancer. But we know what the prosecution is thinking. Can weed cause cancer? Of course, smoking weed, while not as dangerous to the lungs as tobacco smoking, is still smoking, and the lungs aren't designed to take in anything other than air. Smoking weed habitually has been shown to increase the risk of bronchitis and even lung cancer. There's even been some pretty limited research that drew a conclusion between chronic weed usage and non-seminoma-type testicular cancer, which is far from overwhelming, but still probably worth taking into account if you're the kind of person who inhales as much weed as oxygen on a daily basis. The evidence is in, and now it's time for you to make your verdict. People of the jury, is weed a blessing, a curse, or something in between? Let us know in the comments. Meet Emily, a graphic designer with a sweet tooth that could rival Willy Wonka's. She loves her daily dose of sugar, be it in her coffee, desserts, or snacks. Emily's lifestyle and food choices reflect a typical modern-day diet, heavily influenced by convenience and a love for sweet treats. Her days often start with a store-bought latte laden with syrup and a pastry, sometimes a bowl of sugary cereal at home. Lunches are usually grabbed on the go, consisting of sandwiches or salads with hidden sugars in dressings, and dinners often include processed foods or takeout. Snacking is a regular part of her routine, with a particular weakness for chocolate and soda. Emily's diet, rich in added sugars, is not uncommon in a fast-paced, convenience-oriented society. This habitual consumption of sugar-laden foods and drinks is what initially prompts her to consider the impact of her diet on her health and well-being, leading to a big decision: to embark on a 30-day sugar-free challenge. Why? To see how her body and mind react to this drastic change. Let's sprinkle some context on the matter. It's no secret that sugar is a key ingredient in many American diets. In fact, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the average American consumes 34 teaspoons of sugar daily, amounting to over 500 calories. This consumption translates to more than 100 pounds, the equivalent of 3 cinder blocks of sugar per person annually. So, has it always been that bad? Nope, there's been a dramatic increase in sugar intake compared to historical data. For instance, in 1822, the amount of sugar an average American consumed in 5 days was equivalent to the sugar content in a single 12-ounce soda today, meaning on average Americans now consume that much sugar every 7 hours. This excessive intake is not just the result of a sweet tooth gone wild, it's a national health concern. With sugar hidden in everything from bread to salad dressings, it's no wonder our consumption of sugar is off the charts. Now consider the effects of this sugar overindulgence. But before we do, we have a question for you. Other than your diet, do you feel like there's another issue in your life? The kind that interferes with your happiness or prevents you from achieving your goals? Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human who lives in this world who's going through a hard time, therapy can give you the tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible. And this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description. It's betterhelp.com/infographics. Clicking that link helps support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with a therapist, which is a common thing with therapy, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost, without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/infographics.
Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Now, as we were saying, let's look at the effects of sugar overindulgence. From spiking blood sugar levels to contributing to obesity, the impacts are far-reaching and often underestimated. Sugar is like that friend who's fun in small doses but can wreak havoc when around too much. It's a source of instant energy, sure, but it comes with a cost. A cost to our health, our energy levels, and even our mood. The 2015-2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans advise restricting calories from added sugars to a maximum of 10% of your daily caloric intake. For a diet of 2,000 calories, this equates to 200 calories, or roughly 12 teaspoons of sugar. What does this mean in terms of food, though? Well, the average 20-ounce bottle of sugar-sweetened soda, lemonade, or iced tea contains 65 grams of added sugar. That's the equivalent of 16 teaspoons of table sugar. So why focus on a 30-day challenge? It's long enough to witness significant changes, yet short enough to be achievable. This time frame allows our bodies to adjust, detoxify, and react to the absence of sugar. It's a period of revelation for many as they discover just how dependent their bodies and tastes have become on this sweet substance. And if you can make it 30 days, you can usually take things even further. Some might even make this way of eating part of their lifestyle. Emily's journey, which we'll delve into, is not just about cutting out a dietary element. It's about rediscovering food, flavors, and perhaps a healthier version of herself. Join us as we follow Emily's 30-day sugar-free journey in an exploration that's not just about what she's missing out on, but more importantly, what she gains when sugar is off the table. As Emily embarks on this journey, she realizes that it's not just about avoiding the obvious culprits, candies and cakes. Sugar lurks in many unsuspecting places, from breakfast cereals she used to munch on every morning to the salad dressing she puts on her seemingly healthy choices. It becomes clear that this challenge requires a mindful examination of her entire diet. Emily starts reading labels more carefully, discovering the hidden sugars in many processed foods. She swaps out her usual grocery items for whole, unprocessed alternatives. Instead of sugary breakfast cereals, she opts for oatmeal or whole grain cereal with no added sugar. She exchanges white bread for whole grain or sprouted bread, and instead of prepackaged snacks and flavored yogurts, she chooses raw nuts, seeds, and plain Greek yogurt. For sweet cravings, she turns to fresh fruits rather than reaching for cookies or candy bars. In place of processed, ready-to-eat meals, she starts buying fresh vegetables, lean proteins like chicken or fish, and whole grains like quinoa or brown rice to cook simple, nutritious meals at home. This not only reduces her sugar intake, but also introduces her to a variety of new and natural flavors. The first few days are the hardest. Emily battles intense cravings, a common symptom of sugar withdrawal. She finds herself daydreaming about Snickers bars and pumpkin spice lattes. However, she stays committed, filling her diet with fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and proteins. She notices that the wholesome foods keep her full for longer, reducing her temptation to snack. Emily also experiments with natural sweeteners like honey and dates in her cooking and baking, exploring just how a smidge of these can add a different kind of sweetness to her meals. This phase of the journey is as much about discovery as it is restriction, and Emily starts to appreciate the natural flavors from her food more than she ever did before. As the first week progresses, Emily confronts more than just cravings. She starts experiencing headaches and a noticeable dip in her energy levels, particularly in the afternoons. This is a typical response as her body is accustomed to regular sugar and hits of quick energy, and it now has to adjust to a slower, more consistent energy source. Emily combats this by increasing her intake of water and including healthy fats and proteins in her meals to sustain her energy. She finds out that snacking on nuts and seeds instead of reaching for chocolate helps keep her energy levels more stable. Social situations present another challenge. Coffee catch-ups and office birthdays, usually accompanied by sweet treats, become a test of willpower. Emily realizes how much her social interactions revolve around sugary foods. She starts to bring her own snacks, like fruit or unsweetened yogurt, to these gatherings. It's awkward at first, but her friends and colleagues soon become supportive of her endeavor. This shift not only helps her stick to her sugar-free goal, but also sparks conversations about dietary choices and health among her peers. Emotionally, Emily feels a roller coaster of highs and lows during the first week. The initial excitement of starting a new challenge gives way to moments of frustration and temptation. However, she starts to document her journey, journaling her feelings and food choices each day. This reflection becomes a powerful tool, helping her understand her emotional relationship with food, particularly sugar. It's a revelation for Emily to see how much her mood and food were intertwined.
By the end of the first week, despite her struggles, Emily begins to feel a sense of accomplishment. She's more in tune with her body and her choices, setting the stage for more discoveries in the weeks to come. Entering the second week, Emily starts to notice a shift in her body's reaction to the lack of sugar. The headaches begin to subside, and her energy levels start to stabilize. This change aligns with research suggesting that reducing sugar intake can lead to more consistent blood sugar levels, helping to avoid the highs and lows often caused by sugar spikes and crashes. Emily also observes her cravings for sugar are diminishing. Where once the thought of a cookie would have her salivating, she now passes by the office snack table with hardly a second glance. Believe it or not, a reduction in sugar consumption can significantly lower the desire for sweet foods. One surprising development for Emily is an improvement in her sleep quality. She finds herself falling asleep more easily and waking up feeling more refreshed. This improvement can be attributed to better blood sugar regulation, as noted in several health studies. High sugar diets have been linked to poor sleep patterns, so the positive change is a welcome benefit of her sugar-free lifestyle. Additionally, Emily starts experimenting with her diet, incorporating more fiber-rich foods and healthy fats, which not only help in curbing sugar cravings but also contribute to an overall sense of well-being. By the end of the second week, Emily begins to feel a newfound sense of control over her diet and health. This empowerment is echoed in the wider scientific community. For example, the American Heart Association's guidelines on sugar intake suggest that reducing sugar intake can lead to better cardiovascular health and a lower risk of obesity-related diseases. Emily realizes that her 30-day challenge is turning into a profound learning experience about nutrition and health, giving her insights that'll influence her dietary choices long after the challenge is over. This week reinforces the idea that while cutting out sugar can be difficult initially, the body's ability to adapt and thrive is remarkable. As Emily enters the third week of her sugar-free journey, the physical benefits become increasingly evident. She notices her skin is clearer and more radiant than before. This improvement in skin health is supported by research that links high sugar consumption to inflammation and aging of the skin. The process of glycation, where sugar in the bloodstream attaches to proteins and forms harmful new molecules, can lead to skin issues. By reducing her sugar intake, Emily is experiencing a decrease in this process, resulting in healthier skin. Mentally, Emily feels more alert and focused. The foggy brain and afternoon slumps that were once a regular part of her day are now gone. This boost in cognitive function experienced by Emily is because of high sugar diets negatively impacting mental clarity and focus. The stabilization of her blood sugar levels is likely contributing to this increased mental sharpness. Furthermore, Emily finds her mood is more consistent. She no longer experiences the mood swings that often accompanied her sugar highs and crashes. That's because reduced sugar intake can lead to better mental health and stability, even reducing symptoms associated with anxiety and depression. Another significant change Emily observes is in her digestive health. She experiences less bloating and discomfort, symptoms that were previously common for her. This improvement can be attributed to a reduction in sugar, which can disrupt gut health and lead to gastrointestinal issues. Studies have shown that overconsumption of sugar can contribute to various non-communicable diseases, including gastrointestinal problems. Emily's decision to replace sugary foods with fiber-rich fruits, vegetables, and whole grains has not only helped in reducing her sugar intake, but also improved her overall digestive health. By the end of the third week, Emily feels like she's not just surviving without sugar, but thriving, experiencing firsthand the comprehensive benefits of a reduced sugar diet. By the fourth week of her sugar-free journey, Emily begins to see signs of long-term health benefits. One notable change is her weight. Without the excess calories from sugar, she started to shed a few pounds. It's true, a reduction in sugar intake can lead to weight loss, as sugar is a major source of empty calories in many diets. The American Heart Association's guidance on sugar consumption supports this, suggesting that reducing added sugars can have a significant impact on obesity, as well as related health issues like type 2 diabetes. Another area where Emily sees a marked improvement is in her heart health. She feels more energetic during her workouts, and overall, her body feels lighter and more efficient. Research has demonstrated that lowering sugar intake can decrease the risk of heart disease by reducing factors like inflammation, blood pressure, and bad cholesterol levels. These changes are crucial for mitigating the risk of cardiovascular diseases, which are often exacerbated by high sugar diets. The effect of these changes is not just physical. Emily's overall quality of life has improved. She feels more in control of her eating habits and less dependent on sugar for emotional comfort or a quick energy boost. This sense of empowerment and improved health literacy is a critical aspect of making sustainable dietary changes. Understanding the impact of your dietary choices on long-term health can lead you to form more consistent and healthy eating patterns. As Emily concludes her 30-day sugar-free challenge, she reflects on the journey and realizes that the lessons learned extend far beyond this short period. The awareness and habits she's developed promise lasting benefits for her overall health and well-being. So what would happen if Emily continues this no-sugar lifestyle? As Emily moves beyond the 30-day mark and into the future, the long-term effects of her reduced sugar intake will begin to manifest in even more significant ways. Over the next few years, her consistent low-sugar diet could contribute to a reduced risk of developing chronic illnesses. Diets high in added sugars are linked to an increased risk of type 2 diabetes, certain cancers, and fatty liver disease. By maintaining her reduced sugar intake, Emily significantly lowers her chances of facing these health issues. Her commitment to a healthier lifestyle acts as a preventative measure against these potentially life-altering conditions. Additionally, Emily's sustained low-sugar diet will have a profound impact on her dental health. With sugar being a leading cause of tooth decay and gum disease, her continued avoidance of high-sugar foods can help in maintaining better oral health. This is not just about fewer cavities or dental issues, it's about overall health, as poor oral health is often linked to other systemic health problems. Emily's conscious decision to limit sugar intake will pay off in the form of a healthier smile and fewer dental complications, a benefit underscored by numerous dental health studies. Mentally, Emily will find that her mood and cognitive functions continue to benefit from her low-sugar diet. The initial improvements in mental clarity and mood stability she experienced in the first month will over time become more pronounced. She'll also notice an enhanced ability to concentrate on work and a general sense of improved well-being. The dietary changes that started as a 30-day challenge can now evolve into a lifestyle choice, providing Emily with enduring physical and mental health benefits. Her journey underscores the profound impact dietary choices can have, not just in the short term, but for years to come, shaping a healthier, more vibrant life. A short-term experiment like this can fundamentally change your relationship with food. Viewing food as nourishment, rather than just a source of pleasure or comfort, is one of the most significant shifts in a sugar-free journey. For Emily, a key realization was understanding the importance of balance in her diet and developing a newfound appreciation for the natural flavors in whole, unprocessed foods. Moving forward, Emily might decide to go on a totally sugar-free diet, or she could opt for a reduced sugar diet. Not as a strict rule, but as a guideline for healthier living. After all, she's learned the value of moderation and the impact of mindful eating. While it may be a challenging journey at first, going sugar-free is well worth the short-term discomfort. So why not try your own sugar-free journey, even if just a short period, to experience the benefits firsthand? A story like Emily's is a testament to the power of dietary choices in transforming health. Here are a few of our top tips to kick off your experiment. First and foremost, you'll want to plan and prepare. This means starting your sugar-free journey by planning your meals and snacks in advance. Remove sugary items from your pantry and fridge and stock up on whole, unprocessed foods like fruit, vegetables, lean proteins, and whole grains. Preparing homemade meals allows you to control the ingredients and avoid hidden sugars found in processed foods. Additionally, consider meal prepping at the start of the week to make it easier to stick to your sugar-free goals. Next, remember to read your food labels carefully. One of the key aspects of reducing sugar intake is becoming aware of the hidden sugars in many packaged foods. Start by reading nutrition labels and ingredient lists on everything you buy. Look out for the different names for sugar, like fructose, sucrose, maltose, and high fructose corn syrup, among others. Be particularly mindful of products that are marketed as healthy, natural, or low-fat, as they often contain added sugars to enhance flavor. Additionally, find healthy alternatives to manage those cravings. Instead of completely cutting out all things sweet, find healthier alternatives to satisfy your cravings. Use natural sweeteners like honey, maple syrup, or stevia in moderation, of course, and incorporate more fruits into your diet for a natural sugar fix. Also, staying hydrated, getting enough sleep, and managing stress can significantly help in reducing sugar cravings. You probably heard a lot of different takes on the pros and cons of going vegan, especially as more and more people have been embracing the plant-based diet. A healthier lifestyle, a more ethical approach to animal welfare, and maybe even a way to save the planet. But unfortunately, not all of what you may be told in favor of or arguing against going vegan is entirely true. So, we as impartial omnivores are here to answer this question of what actually happens to your body when you go vegan. Because believe us, it's a lot more complicated than you think. It should be noted that going vegan, much like any diet or other dedicated lifestyle change, isn't something that should be undertaken lightly. It's an intensely personal decision and one that's worth investing a fair bit of research into before you commit to it, given the potential impact it can have on your day-to-day life. Don't feel pressured to jump to a decision unless you feel confident you've absorbed enough information. Nobody should feel like they need to go vegan just because a friend, family member, or even a random person on the internet told them to, as you're likely to experience in this video's comment section. Sorry about that. Secondly, it's also important to remember that the way in which our bodies react to certain food groups is down to the individual. Each of our bodies have needs that are specific to us and us alone. And while it's essential to consume a balance of all the major food groups where possible, it isn't always a case of one size fits all. The needs of one person's body can be dramatically different from another, owing to a whole range of biological, genetic, and even psychological factors. Some of us can have allergies and sensitivities to certain foods, while others might need more of a specific group of foods in order for their body to function. It's important to take those bodily needs into consideration before we start any kind of diet, as most diets, including going vegan, involve increasing or decreasing our intake of certain food groups. So, with all that in mind, let's delve deeper into what happens to your body when you go vegan. The first thing you might reasonably assume when starting out is that you'll be having severely less protein in your diet, and your body will start to miss it. After all, a lot of meats are extremely high in protein, and a large part of going vegan involves not having any meat or other animal products in your dietary rotation. However, this doesn't necessarily eliminate protein entirely. Doing that would be highly inadvisable for your health. In fact, no protein at all in your diet could lead to serious health complications. A lack of protein can cause someone's muscle mass to decrease significantly, which, as you might imagine, reduces your strength. But this can also make it harder to keep your balance, and even worse, it slows down your metabolism, making it harder to burn calories and leads to more of them being stored as fat in your body. Added to that mix is the possibility of hair loss and dull skin, plus the risk of developing anemia, which causes a lower red blood cell count and thus a lack of oxygen-rich blood to your body, which can make you feel tired and weak. All of this serves to prove that getting adequate protein is important to aid the body's cellular maintenance. It literally helps our bodies survive by strengthening the immune system. But this, of course, begs the question, if someone opts to go vegan and can't eat meat as a result, where does their body get the necessary protein from? Well, luckily it's not just meat that's rich in protein. In fact, there's a variety of other foods that qualify as vegan, which can provide the body with plenty of protein, without it needing to come from animal products. For one, nuts and seeds are a great source of protein. Pistachios, quinoa, beans, peas, or any products that are soy-based like tofu are great sources of protein for those who go vegan. The idea that cutting out meat from your diet in order to go vegan is harmful is not an unwarranted claim, but it isn't as fatal as some naysayers might have you believe. There are plenty of high-protein alternatives to meat for somebody deciding to go vegan, and these can provide their body with the proteins they need to survive. So while as a vegan, or even if you're not, it's important to keep an eye on your protein intake. As long as you're getting enough, your body shouldn't experience any adverse effects. As with any diet, there's no shortage of noticeable changes that can occur from switching to a vegan diet. However, one possible difference that someone might not be immediately aware of after making the switch is a healthier gut. When it comes to the arduous process of, processing food that we eat, our guts are in the front line, taking on the brunt of the work. And it's because of all that hard work that it's important to remember to take care of your gut, even though it's often an easy thing to overlook. After all, unless you're in the midst of a bad stomachache, you might not tend to pay much thought to your gut. However, going vegan can have benefits to the overall health of your gut. You see, within the gut is what's known as the gut microbiome. This is a collection of bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live within your intestines, the organ responsible for part of the digestive process. Now, don't panic. We know hearing you have bacteria and fungi in your body might sound alarming at first. There are actually trillions of those microbes that live in your intestines and even on your skin. But again, don't panic. It's not a sign of illness. As a matter of fact, it's the total opposite. While it's true that a lot of bacteria can cause disease, there are plenty that are extremely important for helping maintain your bodily health, contributing to your immune system and digestion, like the ones that form the gut microbiome. With all that worry cleared up, back to the positive impact that going vegan can have on your gut. Specifically, switching to a vegan diet can improve the health of your gut microbiome, and that, in turn, can work wonders for the rest of your body. One study examined the effects of vegetarian and vegan diets on gut microbiomes and found that keeping to a vegan diet means the ecosystem within the gut remains diverse. A lot of those helpful microbes we mentioned before can be introduced into the gut microbiome through a more plant-based diet, bringing in beneficial bacteria that can support the gut, and that, in turn, can improve your overall health. The gut microbiome plays a huge part in controlling how we digest our food. It keeps our immune system functioning, as well as aiding in plenty of other bodily processes. So keeping that filled with beneficial bacteria is definitely a compelling reason for going vegan, given the potential benefits. Of course, it's important to reemphasize that all of our bodily needs vary from person to person. Current research in the topic has shown that going vegan can promote a diverse ecosystem within the gut microbiome, and this can lead to health outcomes such as improved digestion. But that's not to say everyone with a strict plant-only diet will experience the same benefits. A number of people across the world will pursue different diet options with the express intention of losing weight. Now, firstly, it's important that we remember how much of an intensely personal decision this is. After all, many people are comfortable in their body weight and should be allowed to feel that comfort. Meanwhile, others might find that they need to lose weight for medical reasons, and that may put their health at risk if unaddressed. Being vegan puts more emphasis on having a cleaner way of eating, removing meat and animal products for both potential health benefits, but often to remain socially and ethically conscious of how these products are created. However, while losing weight isn't the goal of veganism necessarily, someone who's made the decision to turn to eating vegan might find themselves dropping a few pounds as a result. This is arguably less a direct effect of veganism on the body and is instead the removal of the effect of other foods. Eating red meat, or any foods that are processed, has long been linked with an increase in weight. This doesn't happen overnight, of course, but gradually over the course of a number of years, someone with a high amount of these foods in their diet, without the proper exercise, might see themselves slowly gaining weight. Weight loss as a result of a vegan diet, including more food that's less calorie-dense than the food present in an omnivore diet. Vegetables and fruits are often a lot less calorie-dense than meat, meaning that consuming the same quantity of food in a vegan diet will lead to less calories being consumed. As you might have already figured out, since veganism stresses not eating meat or most processed foods, this possible byproduct of eating said foods is no longer present, and there are other health benefits associated with this aspect of the diet too. Since there's also a link present between red meat and processed meat and an increased risk of diabetes, heart disease, and even colon cancer. So by removing meat from their diet, a person's body is likely to gain slightly less weight and as a result potentially avoid these health risks. It's also worth noting the fact that while weight loss isn't usually the intention of going vegan, a significant drop in one's weight can be as potentially dangerous as a gradual increase. In extreme cases, losing too much weight can deprive your body of the nutrients it requires in order to perform various functions. This is why, even if a person is vegan, the idea of a balanced diet is so important. Food is one of the ways in which our bodies get their intakes of vitamins and minerals, and losing a dangerous amount of weight can cause deficiencies in these. Given how essential they are for your body to properly do all the things it needs to do, a lack of certain nutrients can weaken your immune system and make it harder for your body to repair injuries and run the risk of causing more severe health conditions. As with any diet, it's important for someone who is vegan to pay close attention to the weight they might be losing as a result of purely plant-based eating. While not without its risks, just like any significant bodily change, the potential for weight reduction is only one of the many possible outcomes that someone can experience from going vegan, with another being a potential improvement to the person's heart. Now, by this, we don't mean that a person who is vegan automatically starts feeling more love or affection, or even that they're inherently more emotional than anyone who isn't. Though you may meet a few vegans with all hemp outfits that insist otherwise. We're talking about the actual health of the heart itself, the organ responsible for pumping blood around the body. As we mentioned previously, the removal of meat and other processed animal products from someone's diet can be great for weight loss, but some of these foods are also high in cholesterol. That's a waxy, fat-like substance you'll find in all the cells within your body that carries certain proteins throughout your bloodstream. Red meat is a big offender in this category, along with a lot of full-fat dairy products. Think milk, cream, and of course cheese. Ever felt kinda queasy after too much mozzarella? It happens, believe us, and the results are not pretty. If your level of cholesterol is too high, then that comes with its own boatload of possible issues, perhaps the most dangerous being heart disease. This can refer to a few different types of conditions that affect the heart, but one of the most serious is coronary heart disease. If fatty substances are allowed to build up within the blood vessels that travel to the heart, then it can lead to these vessels getting narrower or worse, blocked. This can, in a lot of cases, cause heart attacks, which we probably don't even need to tell you can often be fatal. Somebody who has removed meat and processed foods from their diet is less likely to develop a level of cholesterol that might put them at a greater risk of coronary heart disease. In fact, removing these aforementioned products and introducing more plant-based foods in their place can actually improve the general health of the heart. Whole grains and nuts are all rich in vitamins and minerals, as well as fiber, which is useful for the body to carry out its essential functions. Now, another important reminder. Simply removing one specific type of food from your regular diet isn't an instant cure-all for potential issues. On top of that, there is such a thing as good cholesterol, so having the goal of intaking as little cholesterol as possible or even wanting to be as extreme as having none whatsoever can also be problematic. The body produces its own cholesterol in order to internally manufacture hormones, vitamin D, and other substances that aid with digestion, so none of us can ever truly have zero cholesterol. High-density lipoprotein cholesterol, however, is what's commonly referred to as good cholesterol. It can absorb excess cholesterol in the blood and carry it toward a person's liver. There it can be flushed out and expelled from the body, meaning that higher levels of HDL cholesterol can reduce the risks of conditions like heart disease. Low-density lipoprotein cholesterol is the type that collects in the walls of your blood cells. The reason it's important to be aware of the difference is that it's still possible to have high levels of LDL cholesterol even if someone is eating a vegan diet. Just because something is vegan doesn't make it inherently healthy. As with any foods, vegan foods that are high in LDL can be consumed in a way that is unhealthy. For example, any foods that are high in refined grains. Think about your pasta, white rice, or any drinks with a high sugar content. They can also introduce more LDL cholesterol into your system and leave you at risk of heart disease. Although a vegan diet can potentially reduce the risk of a person developing heart disease and improve the overall health of their heart, that isn't to say it's a guarantee, nor does it mean that vegans are immune to the dangers of having too high a level of LDL cholesterol. It often comes down to the vegan options an individual chooses to consume. Those are what determines the level of specific types of cholesterol and thus either reduces or increases the potential for heart disease. As with their calorie intake, the weight that they might have gained or lost, and any other factor relating to any other diet, cholesterol intake is something a person going vegan should ideally monitor, just to be on the safe side, as should we all. A reduced risk of heart disease is far from the only change the body can undergo as a result of a vegan diet. As a matter of fact, the body's likely to change in response to any diet. It's important to remember that not all of these changes are always visible or can be felt, and not all of them are always good changes either. Sometimes, although this one again varies person to person, somebody going vegan can experience a loss in their bone mass. Just as there are those that benefit the body in other ways, like aiding digestion or growth, there are specific nutrients that improve the strength and density of human bones. And unfortunately for anybody that's gone vegan, these particular nutrients are found in animal products. Dairy, while it can be filled with high levels of cholesterol, can also be an excellent source of calcium, which the body can use to maintain the strength of one's bones. Many of the body's muscles, including those within the heart, also rely on calcium. Studies even suggest that calcium and vitamin D can assist in protecting the body against cancer, diabetes, and high blood pressure. Then there's vitamin B12, important for maintaining the mineral density of a person's bones. B12 can often be found in eggs, beef, and salmon, and as you've most likely realized, all of those are animal products, and that means they're off the menu for anyone who wants to stick to being vegan. Having reduced levels of these bone-benefiting nutrients can sometimes cause anyone who's strictly vegan to have a lower bone density. While this might not be apparent right away, since none of us can see our own bones without the use of an X-ray machine, low bone density can lead to a condition known as osteoporosis. Since our bones are living tissue, they're constantly being broken down and replaced with new bone. Osteoporosis occurs when the creation of this new bone slows down, and you can't keep up with the old bone being broken down. It causes a person's bones to weaken and makes them brittle, to the point where they can break a lot easier. In some cases, just bending over or coughing can fracture someone's bones if they have the disorder. Now, you might think this is a death sentence for the bones of anyone going vegan. After all, if you can't get the necessary nutrients to keep your bones healthy, you surely must be doomed to develop osteoporosis. While a lot of the things beneficial to bones are found in animal products, there are other alternative sources. For example, we mentioned calcium, which is commonly found in dairy products, but a lot of soy products on the market are also rich in calcium, along with almonds and both white and black beans. Just like being aware of what alternative source they're getting their protein from, someone going vegan will want to consider how they're getting their other vital nutrients into their diet in order to avoid complications like osteoporosis. There are plenty of other bodily changes that can occur as a result of going vegan. For one, someone might experience an unpleasant change in their skin. Some dermatologists have linked veganism with skin breakouts, when the hair follicles of the face get clogged with dead skin cells and excess oil, causing the formation of acne. This can occur as a result of a vegan person switching their sources of protein from meat to more plant-based options. Certain soy products are known to contain phytoestrogens, which are a compound found in plants that can affect the body's normal levels of hormones, and this in turn can trigger breakouts of acne. Although as undesirable as it might sound, continuing on a vegan diet does not mean that these breakouts persist indefinitely and can often even clear up on their own. There is another change that if you are vegan or have ever lived with one, you may have been holding your breath for us to bring up: the touchy and admittedly stinky subject of vegan farts. This is technically a sequel to our point about the diverse gut biome, often caused by a plant-based diet, but anyone who eats purely plants will also be taking an absolute truckload of fiber, which also promotes good digestive health. The excess gut bacteria also results in the stomach and intestines producing excess gas, which leads to some truly noxious flatulence. A new vegan might find this bodily change embarrassing or even worrying, but your body will adjust to the change over time. To alleviate symptoms in the meantime, you'll want to stay hydrated and cook gas-inducing foods like cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower rather than eating them raw. Taking probiotic supplements on the side probably won't hurt either. While it can cause a number of bodily changes, adopting a vegan diet isn't inherently a bad thing. As with any diet, the key to maintaining the necessary things your body needs to function is to practice good planning and awareness of what you're eating. This might not prevent any and all changes that being vegan can incur, but keeping track of what foods you're getting what nutrients from can prove useful in indicating what might be affecting the body.
We all know what it's like to be hungry, maybe even really, really hungry. Your stomach growls, you might get a little lightheaded, your body's doing everything it can to tell you that it's time to drop whatever you're doing and grab a snack. It's a minor inconvenience that we all must live with, unless you're a robot or a human with cybernetic stomach that runs on cold fusion. But that's a subject for another episode. If you're too lazy to cook, maybe you pop a frozen dinner in the microwave or resort to a cup of ramen noodles. Whatever your case may be, your munching quickly satisfies your demanding stomach and you can move on with your day. But what if you had to endure that sensation of hunger for a longer period of time? What's it like to experience starvation? And how long can you go without eating? Now, just to be clear, we wouldn't recommend that you go home after watching this episode and attempt to stop eating. That would not be a very good idea. If you do decide that you want to challenge yourself, please consult your doctor before doing so. After all, we wouldn't want to see one of our beloved fans starve. Not that we're insulting your intelligence, we just felt the need to add a disclosure here. You know, just so we don't get into trouble for being a bad influence on young minds. Anywho, as you may already know, the human body can't last more than a few days without water. So just to add a bit of clarification, the cases we'll explore don't involve going without much needed H2O. We're talking solely about food. Because it's unethical to study starvation in a laboratory for obvious reasons, there's a current lack of scientific research about it. Thus, most studies revolving around the subject tend to examine occurrences of starvation in the real world, including instances of religious fasts and hunger strikes. Since these individuals are already choosing not to eat by choice, scientists can ethically look into and monitor the effects of these particular cases. We can also look into it by examining past instances of starvation. You're probably familiar with the historically famous Mahatma Gandhi, the man who lived in India during the late 1800s and early 1900s, inspired movements for civil rights and freedom across the world. He was a greatly inspirational figure, and some of his quotes live on today. Sayings like, "The weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. Where there is love, there is life," and many more. You may also know that he survived 21 days of complete starvation. How did he do it? What was his secret? That's what we endeavored to find out. Gandhi took on a total of about 17 fasts during India's freedom movement for independence from British rule. He often used hunger strikes as a tool to promote his philosophy of non-violence. It was his way of performing a peaceful protest. His first fast took place in 1913 from November 10th to the 16th. In 1914, his next fast expanded to 14 days. His third successful fast lasted 3 days in 1918 and resulted in Ahmedabad mill owners rushing to the negotiation table to
seal a settlement with the striking workers that Gandhi had led. He continued to take on fasts of different lengths in 1919, 1921, and 1922. Thus, in 1924, by the time of his famous 21-day-long fast, he'd already had a lot of practice with self-control and restraint from eating. He, of course, endured many more fasts after this, but 21 days was the longest his fast ever lasted. The Mahatma is considered the champion in the department of fasting and hunger striking. Many people have made attempts to follow the master and try it for themselves. They say it takes a ton of willpower and the temptation to eat can be highly overwhelming. Starvation itself is not pleasant. You know that awful feeling you experience when you haven't eaten all day? Imagine that feeling, but way more intense. The severe deficiency in calorie intake combined with the most extreme conditions of malnutrition imaginable are enough to drive you mad. In this state of mind, it can be more than a little challenging to resist food. An almost animalistic mindset consumes you. You become ravenous, losing all sense of your humanity as your survival instincts take over. Suddenly, eating is no longer a choice, it's a must. People who have undergone starvation in extreme circumstances have reverted to just about anything to relieve their hunger. Consider the story of the 1972 plane crash in the Andes Mountains. A team of rugby players trapped in snow and freezing cold temperatures experienced extreme starvation to the point where they were forced to turn to cannibalism. The cold caused them to burn calories more quickly, and they were desperate. Thus, they ate the dead bodies of human casualties from the crash. We made an episode about this disaster not too long ago, so as a side note, you should check it out. There's another story from an episode of I Shouldn't Be Alive where two young teenage boys named Josh and Troy found themselves stranded in the Atlantic Ocean after taking a fishing boat out from the coast of South Carolina. They were lost at sea for 6 days, suffering from extreme starvation. This hunger caused one of the boys to snack on the poisonous jellyfish and even considered eating his own finger. The awful feeling of deprivation was enough to make both boys wish for death. One even attempted to drown himself to ease his suffering, but to no avail. This may seem like nothing though compared to the 76-day man, but that's discussed in another episode. There's a reason the temptation to eat is so powerful. After all, prolonged starvation can cause organ damage and death. In patients with anorexia nervosa, up to 20% die from organ failure or myocardial infarction. This tends to happen when the body weight falls between 60 to 80 pounds. Thus, the instinctual mechanism of action urging us to eat is meant and designed by nature to keep us alive. When you fast for a long time, you're basically fighting against your biological drive. Experts tend to recommend that you eat every 3 to 4 hours or so for optimal health, but starvation doesn't happen immediately, so skipping a meal now and then isn't a big deal. Your body is a well-oiled machine that doesn't want to go into starvation mode and will usually do whatever it takes to preserve energy to resist going into that physical state. Many people claim that they feel like they go into starvation mode after about a day of not eating, but this isn't the case. It doesn't happen as quickly as you might think. Registered dietitian Dr. Dubost from Pennsylvania told Self.com that it's actually very difficult to go into complete clinical starvation mode. There's also a difference between the popular culture perception of starvation mode and actually being physically starving. The threshold of time to enter the realm of starvation depends on the individual, but overall she says that it certainly takes longer than going a day without food. Once you're in that zone where you're really starving, there are said to be 3 phases that you go through before you die. Morbid, we know. Each phase is more unpleasant than the last. In the first phase, blood glucose levels are maintained through production of glucose from proteins, glycogens, and fat. There's only enough glycogen stored in a person's liver to last a few hours. After this, blood glucose levels are maintained from breaking down fats and proteins. The longer you go without eating, the more your body turns to resources within itself to keep going. The second phase of starvation lasts the longest of the 3. During this time, your body fat is the main energy source. Your body drains itself of your fat to keep it sustained. You increasingly feel yourself getting skinnier, but not necessarily in a good or healthy way. It may be here where you feel like your body is screaming at you. I know you want to look good in that bikini, it might say, but please eat something, anything, help us out here. Resisting its message is not easy, especially if you have access to food. The third phase of starvation occurs when fat reserves are used up and depleted. The body then starts taking from your muscles to feed itself. When muscles are depleted, cell functions start to degenerate. Along with your weight loss, you may experience symptoms of apathy, withdrawal, listlessness, and increased susceptibility to disease. The last one happens because the impact of starvation weakens your immune system. Some people end up dying of illness due to starvation before actually dying from starvation itself. The diseases that starving people succumb to mainly include kwashiorkor and marasmus. Kwashiorkor affects those who are protein energy deficient and results in edema and in enlarged fatty liver. This is also what gives starving children bellies, creating an illusion that they're well-fed. Marasmus also happen due to extreme energy deficiency and results in infections that are caused by dangerously low levels of body weight. Death by starvation is incredibly slow and painful. When death finally does come, it's usually caused by cardiac arrhythmia. How long it takes to die often depends on your original BMI or body mass index before starvation. Generally, however, people typically die of starvation in about 3 weeks. Gandhi pushed the limits when he made it to 21 days, though some people have actually managed to surpass the master. As cited in Scientific American, reports from well-documented studies have shown survivors of hunger strikes after 28, 36, 38, and even 40 days. But wait, some reports go beyond this. In 1981, a hunger strike performed by political prisoners against British presence in Northeast Ireland resulted in 10 people dying between periods of 46 and 73 days without food. Now, that's a stretch. Of course, this did lead to their demise, so they wouldn't have been able to exercise their bragging rights upon the strike's conclusion. One strategy that has been used to stave off hunger by those who have fasted for long periods of time include keeping notes to remind themselves of their motivation behind doing so. They ask themselves questions like, why am I still doing this, and what's the point of this again? They then try and answer the question so that the reasoning is fresh in their minds, pushing forward their motivation to continue not eating. Of course, this technique is not always perfect unless you have a very strong self-control like Gandhi. For most of us, we might cave in and decide that fasting isn't worth the effort anymore once we get a whiff of a juicy, delicious steak or a McDonald's hamburger with fries. Getting hungry? Yeah, we don't blame you. All this talk of hunger and not eating kinda makes you want to eat, doesn't it? In order to abstain from food for as long as great hunger strikers and avoid temptation, your reasoning behind a fast has to be a good one. In other words, you must be highly motivated to fast or you'll just wind up quitting easily and quickly. Some fast out of political motivation like Gandhi, while others may do it for religious purposes. Fasting for a greater cause seems to lead to the most successes. But if you're fasting for the sake of it, you may find that you soon give up, perhaps even before entering true starvation. This is because the pain of long-term hunger is too intense to endure without very strong, solid, motivational reasoning. You'll often hear inspiring headlines about 1 in a million surgeries pulled off by talented surgeons and dedicated nurses, improving or even saving the lives of patients. But for every dream come true, there's always a nightmare. We're talking about the real hack jobs, sawn off limbs, tangled tubes, horrifying body cavity souvenirs, and even one exceptional case, a surgery with a 300% mortality rate. If you're eating, now is the time to stop, because we're about to get nasty, weird, and gross. These are some of history's most insane surgical mistakes. While things are arguably much better now, medical malpractice was horrifyingly common far more recently than you think. Harvard University conducted a study into New York hospitals in 1991, finding that 1 in 25 patients were victims of medical malpractice. But thankfully, even then, the cases we're talking about today are exceptional, and exceptionally horrible to boot. There's even a term for them in medical lingo, never events, meaning things that should never happen, but they do, and all too often in fact. First, let's talk about the horrifying case of mistaken identity. When people are given surgeries intended for others due to egregious clerical errors, take 81-year-old Bimla Nayar. For instance, she was supposed to receive surgery for a jaw displacement in Oakwood Hospital, Michigan. However, she was about to experience something a whole lot worse. Doctors at the hospital mixed up Nayar's CT scan with that of another patient and mistakenly assumed that she was experiencing bleeding from the brain. Nayar was rushed into brain surgery immediately, sawing the right side of her skull open only to find no bleeding. When the surgery was over, Nayar needed to be kept on life support in a comatose state for 60 days. When her recovery was deemed extremely improbable, the ventilator was turned off and Nayar died, all because of a damaged jaw and extreme medical negligence. Unsurprisingly, her family filed a lawsuit and was awarded $21 million. Back in 1995, Dr. Ronaldo R. Sanchez was a menace to anyone who liked keeping their limbs. In the first of his 2 nightmare surgeries, Dr. Sanchez was amputating a patient's leg. However, halfway through the surgery, he noticed that his nurse had begun to cry. She tearfully told him that he was amputating the wrong leg, and Dr. Sanchez was furious. He blamed pretty much everyone but himself, including his team, and even said that he hadn't done anything wrong because the leg he was cutting off was also diseased, and he probably would have needed to do it anyway. Incidentally, nurses in Tampa, Florida have figured out a method for preventing this kind of wrongful amputation, writing the word "no" on the arm or leg that isn't meant to be amputated. It's very Florida, but hey, if it works, it works. Dr. Sanchez would return to perform another feat of epic medical malpractice before finally losing his medical license. Mildred Schuler needed some infected tissue cut from her right foot, in what should have been a very simple operation. But Dr. Sanchez always liked to go above and beyond. He took the entire big toe on Mildred's right foot, insisting it was necessary. The medical board insisted that it was necessary Dr. Sanchez no longer be allowed to practice shortly thereafter. In April 2015, 49-year-old Edwifes Rodriguez also found herself missing some pieces. After finding a lump in one of her breasts and going to the hospital about it, she was misdiagnosed with breast cancer and had one of her breasts removed in a hospital in Manhattan. However, analysis on the severed breasts instead discovered that the lump had actually been a benign growth and that the breast did not, in fact, need to be removed. Though, to play devil's advocate, it's generally better to be safe than sorry when it comes to breast cancer. Speaking of sorry, a hospital in Lebanon, Tennessee needed to apologize profusely to Nate Melton and his mother Jennifer after a pretty heinous mix-up. Nate Melton was literally 1 day old when he became the recipient of an unneeded frenectomy, otherwise known as a tongue clipping surgery. This procedure cuts the tissue that connects the tongue to the floor of the mouth. Nurses came to take Jennifer Melton's brand new baby away for what she thought was a standard checkup, only to find, to her horror, that the doctor was performing surgery. As you probably guessed already, he had been mixed up with another patient. Jennifer got her lawyers involved shortly after. During the 2010s, a doctor from Sheffield, UK proved to be a serial surgical bungler. In a more minor act of medical stupidity, he removed a skin tag instead of a cyst. However, in a more severe example of malpractice, he botched 2 different appendectomies. In the first, he simply removed some fat from a woman who needed the surgery, leaving her in terrible pain until the second surgery could be performed. But even that pales in comparison to a 2015 incident, where during an appendectomy he removed a woman's ovary and fallopian tube during the surgery. He said in his own defense that the organs looked very similar to an appendix due to his poor eyesight. The UK Medical Board could see a little clearer and decided to permanently ban this negligent doctor from treating patients again. We can all rest a little easier now knowing that the guy won't be handling a scalpel at work anymore. But here's the thing, while we are all probably feeling a little paranoid about an incompetent doctor sawing off the wrong limb or taking out one of our perfectly healthy organs, it's not always what these screwy surgeons take that's the problem. Sometimes the issue is what they accidentally leave behind. This may seem like a rare incident, but it's actually upsettingly common. There are several thousand instances of medical supplies being left behind in patients after surgery every year, and that's in the United States alone. Though with the cost of healthcare, you'd probably want to get some freebies with your surgery. The grand majority of the medical equipment left inside patients is medical gauze and sponges, but in the minority of cases, actual surgical tools are left behind. In one incredibly bizarre case, a man from the Czech Republic somehow had a foot-long pipe left inside his body after surgery, which then needed to be removed a month later in a subsequent surgery. In another paranoia-inducing case, Air Force Major Erica Parks had just given birth with the help of an emergency C-section. However, unlike most people who've just given birth, her stomach continued to grow. She also became severely ill and began to experience abdominal pain. She was rushed into surgery only for doctors to find the culprit. A surgical sponge from the earlier C-section had become wrapped up in her intestines, swelling and becoming infected inside her body. It took a 6-hour surgery to finally remove the sponge. It would have been easier to just not leave it in there. Even hearing about some of these cases can be cringe-inducing. A man undergoing treatment for cancer in Wisconsin somehow had a 13-inch surgical retractor left inside his body. A woman undergoing surgery for a uterine cancer had a small pair of surgical scissors left inside her body. A woman undergoing a hysterectomy once somehow even had a whole surgical glove left inside her body in the aftermath. Much like Major Parks and the surgical sponge, these cases can be incredibly dangerous as well as uncomfortable and painful because foreign objects left inside the body can massively increase risk of infection. But if you think everything you've heard before was bad, trust us, it can always get worse. What comes after will make a stolen toe or a misplaced scalpel seem like a pleasant medical experience by comparison. We're warning you, this next one is probably the most disgusting surgical mistake on this list. Put down that sandwich, or you're really gonna regret it. The story of a 31-year-old Chilean woman named Yasna Cortez Caceres hit headlines in 2018 after she signed up for a basic fallopian tube tying operation in Quiliche Hospital, Central Chile. As a mother of 4 children already, Ms. Caceres wanted to put her reproduction on hold until further notice. However, the surgery was botched in a particularly horrifying manner after 2 cuts in her large intestine caused a fistula to develop. And that's as unpleasant as it sounds. A fistula is an abnormal connection forming between 2 hollow spaces in the body. In this case, there was an unnatural overlap between her intestines and her reproductive organs. The result is that Miss Caceres was suddenly defecating through her vagina, a gross and embarrassing problem that also led to her needing to buy over $100 worth of colostomy bags every single day. The employees at Quilique Hospital did apologize profusely for their mistake here and have been providing subsequent surgeries in hopes of solving the problem. We don't actually have any details on that, so we can only hope that Ms. Caceres is satisfied with the results. Personally, we just wish we could forget about it. And finally, the most insane surgical mistake of all, the legendary surgeon with a 300% mortality rate. How is such a thing even possible, you're probably wondering? It definitely wasn't easy, but an exceptional mistake takes an exceptional surgeon, and the 19th century Scottish master of amputation, Robert Liston, was truly exceptional. You see, in the early 1800s, anesthesia wasn't all that popular in surgery, so grisly procedures like amputations were performed while the patient was still conscious. This is as horrible as it sounds. There was lots of screaming and thrashing involved, and every surgery required a team of strong assistants to hold the patient in place. Given that undergoing this kind of surgery was horrible, short surgeries began to equal successful surgeries, and Liston was famed for being the fastest amputator in the UK. He even had the cocky catchphrase, "Time me, gentlemen," before he took to sawing. He could apparently even take off a leg in 2 minutes, which for using a handsaw on a screaming, wriggling patient is pretty damn impressive. But it was his legendary off day that allows him to endure in the history of surgical weirdness. During this fateful surgery, Liston was doing his thing, sawing like a madman to remove his patient's leg as quickly as possible. However, an assistant got too close and accidentally lost a few of his fingers to Liston's masterful blade work. Earlier that same surgery, Liston accidentally cut into the clothes of an elderly surgeon supervising the expert butchery. While Liston hadn't actually cut the old surgeon, he was still covered in blood from the messy surgery and assumed that Liston had severed something important. The old man collapsed and died of a heart attack on the spot. That's fatality number 1. Fatality number 2 was the death of the assistant who lost some fingers. Apparently, the saw was less than clean, resulting in the assistant's later contracting gangrene and dying from his infected injuries. Oh, and as the cherry on top of this excessively bloody cake, the patient didn't pull through either. 3 people dead, 1 surgery. Liston managed to pull off the only surgery with a 300% mortality rate, an achievement he was probably less proud of than his impressive cutting time. So there you have it. Some of history's bloody, disgusting, and downright insane surgical mistakes. In case you're thinking of putting off your next doctor's appointment after this, don't sweat it. These cases are the exceptions rather than the rule. But hey, if you do find yourself on the receiving end of a horrifying surgical mistake, at least you might make the next video. Let's set the scene for your upcoming death. You're lying in bed, surrounded by family and friends. The lights are dimmed and your breathing is shallow. The people around you know it's almost time. You might seem unconscious to them, but in your mind, all kinds of things are happening. Images of childhood come back to you. You're selling lemonade on the street outside your house. Then you're a teenager holding hands with the person who was your first love. You fast forward to adulthood and you're saying "I do" with the woman who was your first wife. A decade later, you're doing the same routine with your second wife. And then the scene fades to black, except there's a light ahead of you. Death is calling, and you walk forward. Or is that how things happen? Or is there nothing during those final few minutes? Having your life flash before your eyes might seem a little too romantic for some. Maybe we don't get this last picture show right before death, and all we're left with is the lights going out. That's it, game over. No great trip through history with a Grim Reaper acting as the tour guide. In 2017, a neurologist named Dr. Cameron Shaw shed some light on those final 30 seconds before the final bell goes. He explained that before we die, right before, there will be blood loss to the brain, unless there's some massive injury and it's lights out immediately. Before we die, we're going to fade out because of this lack of blood to the brain. When that happens, the vision narrows, so right before death, we may well experience something like going down a tunnel. That's perhaps why a lot of people who have died and come back have talked about tunnels. He added, though, that he doesn't believe in out-of-body experiences, only that loss of consciousness might feel like a narrowing of vision and then blackout. The doctor was asked what happens during those final 30 seconds, and he replied that we slowly shut down, and the bits that shut down first are the parts of the brain that make us, us. That's our sense of self, perhaps our humor. After that, the parts of the brain that shut down are the bits where we store memories. You're then still alive for a few seconds, but the doctor said you're pretty much in a vegetative state. This is how he explained it in an interview. For all intents and purposes, you could say they're dead because they don't have a consciousness or an awareness of their surroundings. But if these basal structures are intact, they'll still breathe and have a pulse. Still, people report seeing all kinds of things near death. Some researchers at Hadassah University in Jerusalem, after interviewing people who had near-death experiences, concluded that indeed some people have their lives flash before their eyes. They said that the life might not flash in any type of sequence though, only lots of muddled memories that have flashed through the brain of the almost dead. One woman explained it like this: "It all happened at once, or some experiences within my near-death experience were going on at the same time as others, though my human mind separated them into different events." Then we might look at the story of Dr. Rajiv Party, a man who is the former chief of anesthesiology at the Bakersfield Heart Hospital in California. He was having an operation for his cancer when things went horribly wrong. He didn't die, but was close. He's since written about what he saw during those seconds he was leaving the planet. He wrote, "My father led me down the tunnel toward the light, and we looked at it together, its intensity oddly soothing. I moved forward and then began to walk rapidly in its direction, pulled by a powerful sense of love emanating from its radiance. My father let go of my hand, and I kept moving forward." That doesn't sound too bad at all. And then he said he entered another realm where he met archangels of the Bible. He said they took him to a place where he saw this: "The sweet smell of grass and roses made me almost delirious with pleasure. A crystal clear stream of water cut through the meadow, and the air off the distant mountains was blowing gently." He said he felt pure love in this new land, and he was ready to leave the old land of his former life. That sounds like a massive hallucination, perhaps close to something someone might see on the substance DMT. Psychology Today wrote a story about near-death experiences, but like the doctor we introduced at the start of the show, the writer said a lack of oxygen to the brain might only feel like a tunnel and then you're gone. Tripping in a land of angels and green pastures should not happen. So why do so many people say they see such things? If the brain is dying, we shouldn't really be seeing majestic things, it should be the opposite. This is where DMT comes in. Full name, N,N-dimethyltryptamine. This stuff is sometimes called the spirit molecule, and if you watch Joe Rogan, you'll know he and a lot of other people, while erring on the side of caution, believe this stuff can open a doorway to another kind of reality. DMT is everywhere, in plants and in animals. It's illegal in most countries when it's made into a powerful drug, but in other countries it's taken as part of ceremonies. If you listen to what people say about a thick soup called ayahuasca is like, it's nothing short of unbelievable. DMT is part of that drink and sends people into another reality. If you know anything about DMT, you'll know a lot of people say we humans can produce it all on our own, with some people saying it's responsible for these great dreams we have. Others say as we die we might produce a lot of it. Indeed, scientists at the University of Michigan said the mammal brain can make its own DMT. In a now famous documentary called DMT, the Spirit Molecule, a clinical psychiatrist called Rick Strassman said upon death, DMT can be secreted by the brain's pineal gland, and we might have a mystical experience. This is all quite controversial, but it might explain angels, roses, and eternal love. A bunch of researchers at the Psychedelic Research Group at Imperial College London wanted to get to grips with such mystical experiences near death. They began a study, and people on that study all had near-death experiences. In the study, they took DMT and then were asked to compare their trip to their near-dying. It turned out there were similarities. One of the researchers concluded, "Our findings show a striking similarity between the types of experiences people are having when they take DMT and people who have reported a near-death experience." Scientists are still trying to figure this out, and while some are sure rats create DMT in their pineal gland, others are not so sure humans can do it. More research needs to be done. Another scientist who has studied near-death experiences did say, though, that the experience is often transformative. People who have taken ayahuasca or plain DMT have said the same thing. This is what he wrote about people who have had near-death experiences, and it really does sound like someone who's just come back from Peru following a 5-day ayahuasca marathon. He wrote about near-death experiences. A person's values and attitude toward life are completely transformed. People often become less materialistic and more altruistic, less self-oriented and more compassionate. They often feel a new sense of purpose, and their relationships become more authentic and intimate. They report becoming more sensitive to beauty and more appreciative of everyday things. He went on to say that a lot of people do have those mystical experiences before death, and indeed, they might be a massive hallucination. But he said DMT experiences are not nearly as transformative as near-death trips. There are a lot of skeptics out there, but some people believe that consciousness is a part of the universe at large, and not something just in us. Perhaps when we die, we feel this connection to everything else. Perhaps DMT helps us to realize this connection. The jury is still out, but it's not something we think should be laughed at. So, we might trip out before death, and if we survive, it might change us forever. We found plenty of stories online in which people said they had a wonderful experience at near death. They were so very willing to go, they said it was peaceful. Some described it as beautiful, so if you believe them, then we all have something to look forward to. Science is still in the dark about this, and while a dying brain should not give us these amazing experiences time and again, people have said that that's exactly what happened to them. We went to a Reddit thread where people talked about what happened to them during their near-death experiences. Here are a few of the replies. To me, it felt a bit like slipping into a dream. Everything in the dream feels and looks bright and colorful. It feels like it lasts hours, but when I came back, I'd only been gone for less than 3 minutes. The subject of the dream or anything about it, I didn't remember. I knew none of it made sense, but it felt peaceful, almost uplifting. There's no excitement or struggle or really any awareness of what's going on. You just sorta kinda fade and slip away. Everything is kinda insubstantial, like it's there but not. You sort of know something's not quite right, but somehow that's not important. It felt as though I was sinking into a deep dark pool of water. Everything around me was black and the world we live in kept getting smaller and smaller. It was like I was sinking slowly into a world of unknown. Sound began to act as though it was farther and farther away. In a strange way, I felt at peace. While some scientists say our dying brains should be slowly becoming more inactive, one scientist said this to the BBC. A lot of people thought that the brain after clinical death was inactive or hypoactive, with less activity than the waking state, and we show that that is definitely not the case. If anything, it's much more active during the dying process than ever with the waking state. But more research has shown that some people don't have those illuminating experiences, and during their near-death experience, all they got was pretty much nothing. Another doctor who was interviewed by Live Science said some people who have come back from the dead said they saw people in the room. He said they'll describe watching doctors and nurses working, and they'll describe having an awareness of full conversations, of visual things that were going on that would otherwise not be known to them. He said we still don't know exactly what goes on with consciousness as we die, but there's enough evidence out there to suggest more than fading to black might take place. So to conclude about what happens in the mind before we die, it seems a lot of people do enter another kind of realm, and some feel at peace. It seems some people do see the past, memories of their life, while others don't think about much at all. We can only ask those who have come close, of course, because the dead tend to be quite tight-lipped. By the way, we thought we'd add something to the end of the show because it's relevant and it's just so fascinating. We might also make a show about this in the future. Did you know that doctors of late have started putting people into suspended animation? Like keeping them suspended in death and then bringing them back? This recently happened at the Maryland School of Medicine in the US, and the doctors called it emergency preservation resuscitation. What they did is cool the person down by replacing some of their blood with an ice-cold salt solution. This prevents oxygen from getting into the brain, but the person can be brought back to life. The reason the doctors would do this is so they can perform a medical procedure on someone. Let's say that a person has been shot or stabbed and they go into cardiac arrest. They've lost lots of blood and will die in about 5 minutes, so that means surgeons have to work very fast. But with the suspended animation technique, they might get 2 hours to work on the person. They're technically quite dead, but are brought back. We'd love to know if anything was going on in the patient's mind, but unfortunately this is all new, and their thoughts weren't in the articles that we read about this. The US Food and Drug Administration has just given this the green light, and those surgeons don't even need to get a person's consent before they do it. I was in agony. Absolute, total agony. Around me were hundreds if not thousands of people, all of us intent on being some of the first people to take a ride on Hagrid's Magical Creatures motorbike adventure at Universal's Islands of Adventure theme park. I'd seen the sneak preview video, and it looked amazing, like no other ride I'd ever seen. There was no way I was going to drop out of that queue, but the pain, oh my god, the pain. I felt as if I was holding on to a rising balloon, and if I just held on a little longer, I could make it, but if my grip failed me, I would fall and die. Well, that's just a metaphor, but in reality, I really was on the verge of death. Let me explain. First of all, you should know that I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, not just a fan of the movies, but the books and everything else related to the magical teen and his band of extraordinary buddies. You're probably thinking that I'm just a kid, but you'd be wrong. I was a kid when the first movies came out, but as some guys on the mean streets sometimes say, once an addict, always an addict. When I heard about the new ride in Orlando, I got in touch with another guy I knew from the Harry Potter Fan Club Facebook page, and we both agreed we'd try to get in on the inaugural ride. The reason I picked him is because we both live in Florida. I'm in Tampa and he's in Jacksonville. We wouldn't have to travel too far, so the deal was made. The plan was to get a hotel close to the theme park and the next day wake up well before dawn and start queuing before the crowds came. As you guys all know, you can have the best intentions in the evening, and when you get up in the morning, you don't have the same amount of enthusiasm. We were sharing a room, and that meant when that alarm clock went off at 3 a.m., we weren't in the best of moods. Maybe those few beers the evening before had been a bad idea. Fortunately, the hotel had a 24-hour cafe, so I sank 2 double espressos followed by a bottle of water, followed by a mocha frappuccino to go. My friend wasn't into coffee. He said it gave him anxiety, but I can tell you this, soon after I downed those espressos, I was good to go. Since I knew we'd be standing in line for maybe a couple of hours, we bought some stuff from the convenience store and put the food, water, and soft drinks in our backpacks. What was surprising was the fact that when we got to the park around 5 a.m., there was already a stream of people lined up at the entrance to the park, all of them there for Hagrid's Magical Creatures motorbike adventure. No kidding, we even met a guy who'd come all the way from England. The dude was dressed in a wizard's cape and written on it were the words potty for Potter. He had to explain to me that potty can mean crazy in the UK. The guy was kinda condescending about having to explain that to me, but I paid it no mind. The guy was potty. There was no doubt about that. Flying over the Atlantic for a theme park ride, he told me he'd read in the media that the experience was one of a kind, and the park had spent $300 million on it. He said some of his countrymen traveled the world to watch their stupid football teams lose, so what he was doing wasn't at all that crazy. You mean soccer? I asked genuinely. What did I know? No, he said, shaking his head in disdain. I mean football. Geez, I thought, I'm gonna have to spend the next few hours next to this guy, and I've already upset him. After about an hour, we saw more and more people join the queue. It was hard to say how many because it wrapped around the corner. In front of us, I'd guess there were about 300 to 400 people. The time was now about 7 a.m., so there was only a couple of hours to wait before the park opened. But the thing was, I needed to pee. I'd only had those small espressos and I'd barely touched my mocha frappuccino, but I still felt those first pangs of pee pain. You know, the part where you're not quite sure that if you just hit the release button for a second if something would come out. At 9 a.m., we were allowed inside the park, and to my surprise, no one tried to cut in line. Every single person was directed toward the ride, with some of us now inside the theme park, and from what I could see, a lot of people still in line on the outside. That made me feel quite proud that we made the decision to wake up so early. The sun was now out, and I was in a bit of a predicament. I still needed that pee. Well, I needed it more, but I was also thirsty. Those beers the night before really had been a bad idea. I decided I'd just take a sip of some Coca-Cola rather than glug down the water. I'd later find out that that decision was a bad one because sweet soft drinks, like the coffees I drank, are what you'd call diuretics. What are they, you might wonder? Well, the answer is they promote something called diuresis. Okay, so you're still in the dark about this? The simple answer is they make you pee. Pee more than, say, water. Caffeine is the king of diuretics, and I just had coffee and Coke. I was really holding that pee in at around the 10 a.m. mark, about 5 hours into our queuing. There were some helpful distractions, such as videos playing with some amusing words from Hagrid, or pictures of the ride itself, and the pretty amazing forbidden forest that had been created. But still, I was now in pretty serious pain. At around the 6-hour point, I was standing cross-legged and slightly bent over. This seemed to ease the pain, as if I were squeezing the tubes where the urine traveled to meet its final destination. What I would later find out after a bit of research was that at that point, I was in danger of weakening my bladder muscles, something which could harm my bladder for the rest of my life. In hindsight, that was the least of my worries. Sure, we were getting close to the ride, I hoped, and I just stood there looking like a man who was slightly demented or had recently been in an accident. My buddy had done the right thing and had just been taking small sips of the water. But to be honest, in his excitement, I really don't think he was that concerned about my predicament. I'd also later find out that the parts of my body that were helping me keep in the pee, now probably a tsunami waiting to happen, are called urethral cylindrical sphincters. These are great when you tighten them for a short while, such as when you don't want a puddle of pee beneath you on a busy bus, but they're brakes, not doors. They can be worn out. At the 7-hour mark, I couldn't overstate how much agony I was in. I knew we were getting close to the ride, so I held on for dear life. That British guy heard me telling my buddy that I thought I was about to pee myself. My friend laughed, but I can tell you it wasn't funny to me. My buddy said that if it was that bad, just go find a bathroom and he'd hold my spot in the queue, and you won't believe what happened next. That British guy overheard this and said in no uncertain terms that if I left the queue, then I'd have to start from the back. He said he also needed a pee, but in Britain he said there's a thing called queuing etiquette. I think that this guy thought he was special just because Harry Potter is British. That or he was just a xenophobic snob. I can recall his exact words. He said the reason we have queuing etiquette is because if we didn't, then there'd be chaos. Queuing chaos doesn't work, he said, and then he went about a time in the past he had difficulty buying a train ticket in India and how he'd almost gotten into a fight at a buffet when hordes of hungry Chinese people fought over the shrimp. He said he wasn't picking on me, only that if order broke down, then order would cease to exist. Formal and orderly queuing, he said, in a patronizing way, is the mark of a civilized man. What a total jerk. He told me that if I left the line, he'd make a complaint and say I'd cut in line. What I really couldn't believe is that the other people in the line didn't get my back. So I guess one less man in the line was good for them, so they just kept quiet. The words that went through my head were the milk of human kindness, and then I wished I hadn't thought about milk. Gallons of it pouring over pristine porcelain mountains. At that moment, my urethral sphincters almost called it quits. I'll fill you in later, but I'll tell you that I'd already caused myself some damage. I was at about the 9-hour point, then we were very close to the ride entrance. I'd almost made it, but the problem now was the excitement I felt almost made me lose concentration and loosen those muscles and let all the urine flood out. I had to concentrate. Keep the door locked, I kept saying to myself. Everyone was laughing and joking, taking selfies, and looking in awe at the ride we were about to go on, and I was undoubtedly the only man in that queue who did not have a smile on his face. If anything, I grimaced, a kind of agonized grimace, like someone who just won the lottery and then been told they only have a week to live. We finally got in the castle, but to be honest, I was in no mood for taking photos. I was hardly even aware at this point if I was actually holding a pee in. It was like I'd gone into survival mode. It felt like my urine had become a hardened prisoner. My entire body was now some kind of detainment unit. That ride itself consisted of Hagrid's motorcycle with a sidecar next to it. I told my buddy that in the interests of me holding the pee, it might be best if I took the bike and he took the sidecar. It was all about control. You see, I needed to feel in control. That British guy was right behind me on the other bike, something he'd regret to this day. At something like 50 miles an hour, we drove past Fluffy the three-headed dog and other such things as Cornish pixies and a centaur. I didn't really care. I just wanted the experience to be over as quickly as possible. This was turning out to be one of the most painful and pointless days of my life, and there would be consequences to come. I thought I had it under control, even on the biggest descents and through the sharp bends, but then there was a surprise drop and the heavens burst. The tsunami came. My bladder roared as its doors were kicked down by a violent torrent of urine. My pecker must have been flailing around like an out-of-control fire hose. Hours of backed-up urine gushing from its spout like a great yellow geyser. The pee was everywhere, and it stunk. It was old pee, neglected pee. And when it ejected from me, it spread far and wide. I looked behind me and saw that British guy wincing, looking utterly disgusted. His eyes were glaring into mine. Was I embarrassed, you might ask? No, is the answer. I was relieved, incredibly relieved, and almost ecstatic that my British foe had tasted the vapors of an agony he had been an accomplice in creating. I know, guys, maybe I shouldn't have felt so overjoyed that someone had to experience great wafts of urine vapor in their face, but you know what? I paid for it. I soon got my karma. When I finally got back to Tampa after a pretty awkward farewell with my Harry Potter fanboy buddy, I felt a stinging pain every time I went to the bathroom to pee. After seeing a doctor, I was told I had a urinary tract infection. That could be cured, he said, and he told me he couldn't believe I'd done a 10-hour urine hold. If there are records, he said, I might have broken some. The bad news, though, was that he said the damage done could be irreversible. He told me that long-term bladder stretching could make it hard for me to pee in the future, and one day if I kept doing this kind of thing, I might have to put a catheter into my member and draw the urine out. On the other hand, all that stress on my bladder could lead to incontinence, so holding in even normal pees would be impossible. I had some blood checks and my kidneys were functioning normally, but he said, when you do anything as crazy as I did, kidney damage can occur, as can the appearance of kidney stones. Just don't make a habit of enduring those marathons, he said. A few minutes is fine, but holding it for hours isn't good for you at all. The one thing he said that really scared me is when he told me that the bladder can actually burst when you hold in a pee as long as I did. He said it was very rare, but it had happened. When it does happen, you can actually die. He told me not to worry though, because the cases he'd heard about all happened to people who already had compromised bladders. He said, like what happened to me, before the bladder bursts, people will just pee themselves. He said cases of healthy bladders just bursting are so rare that he doubted that it could have happened to me. But in the few cases it has happened, urine leaked into the abdomen, and when people didn't get straight to the emergency room, they died. The punchline to this story is that I could have actually told one of the attendants at the park that I needed the bathroom and gotten the green light to go, and he would have made sure I got right back into the queue despite what that British guy might have said about that. We've all been there, at least those of us who are the proud owner of testicles. Whether it's a purposeful strike to the balls from an attacker or a stray tennis ball getting you in the sweet spot, you know that it can cause excruciating pain that can leave you on the floor. In worst cases, it can actually do a fair bit of damage, or at least make you throw up. According to Snopes, who asked the question, is it possible to kill a man with a swift kick to the groin? The answer is no. Getting a blow to the privates, gonads, nuts, stones, bullocks, there are more terms, won't be the end of you. But let's find out why it's so painful in this episode of the Infographics Show. Why does it hurt so much to get kicked in the testicles? Okay, so let's just clear up a few things first. We know we said you couldn't die from getting kicked in the ding-dangs, but there is some literature in Germany from the 19th century that said a custom used to exist in which quarreling men would basically squeeze each other's balls. It was written that in one case a man was seized with violent convulsions and died in a few minutes. There have been a few very rare cases in recent times when someone died after taking a hit, but there was always a secondary cause as to why they died. So it's not going to kill you or make you stronger, but it will hurt like hell. Why? These sperm factories and testosterone makers are a man's crown jewels. But unlike the real crown jewels, they are not exactly heavily fortified. They hang outside your body and are not surrounded by bone or muscle as other important organs are. It's almost as if nature gave men an Achilles heel, except put it right under their body's piece de resistance, their highly valued penis. Your junk, of course, is your most valued treasure because without them, you wouldn't be able to procreate. In the cold eyes of Mother Nature, that's the only reason you exist. For that reason, there are lots of nerves around your cojones, so you will take better care of them. Pain, to some extent, is our friend. It helps us to take care of ourselves. People who feel no pain, those suffering from the very rare condition of congenital analgesia, often die young and live miserable lives. So look on the bright side, your sensitivity is good for you. Another good thing is the fact that the large number of sensory nerve endings means it can feel quite nice having them touched. Squeezing, though, might be a bit much for some people. There is another reason why nature put these highly sensitive organs on the outside, and that is because sperm likes a nice climate. If it was too hot or too cold, the sperm would die before it could get to its destination, the female reproductive tract. Your body is amazing. It regulates the temperature of the balls using the cremasteric muscle to pull them up to the body when conditions are too chilly and letting them dangle down on a toasty day. Your lucky balls have year-round climate control. When you get hit in these glands, as we said, there is nothing to protect them. They are so soft they can absorb much of the blow, which would be much better than if you could actually break your balls. But how does the pain manifest? As you boys and men will know, it doesn't just stay down there in those little sacs. The pain moves into your stomach, which is what we call referred pain. The feeling travels like a little pain train up through the perineal and pudendal nerves, and that train's destination is all the way to the groin, the abdomen, up the spine, and sometimes with a last stop at the buttocks. The stomach plays an important part, as your Reese's Pieces actually developed near to your kidneys, and from there they moved down until they reached your ballsack. On the way, they got connected with lots of nerves, which make up your spermatic plexus. For this reason, getting a direct shot to your walnuts can make you feel nauseous or actually make you puke. One doctor described it like this: it's due to the vagal reflex, in which a nerve signal from your testicles travels up your spinal cord and brainstem and activates the nausea and vomiting centers in your brain. He went as far to say that this has another evolutionary purpose, and that is, if you're sick, you will give up the fight and no more damage will be done. He gives the example of animals of the same species getting into a scrap. Often, if the testicles are hurt, the victim gives up and the aggressor moves off. Humans, though, can sometimes be a little more barbaric. So what else can we expect when we get hit in our plums? Well, the pain should last anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. And as you know, there's not much you can do about it. But it can be worse. You might just get a bit of bruising, which can be managed with some ice. You might also hit them so hard that you get something called trauma-induced testicular torsion. That doesn't sound good, and it isn't. We found a research paper that told the story of a 14-year-old boy that did a somersault off a springboard and hit the water bobbles first. His pain didn't go away and he was taken to the ER, where he was diagnosed with a traumatic scrotal hematoma, or blood forming outside the blood vessels. But the pain and swelling just kept getting worse, even with pain medications. He ended up going back to the hospital 5 days later, and it was discovered that one of his testicles was gangrenous. He had immediate surgery and kept the injured apricot. You could also rupture your apples, which basically means you tear them on the inside and the testicular contents get spilled. This can be very painful and usually only happens after extreme trauma, such as your bangers hitting the gear stick of your car as you smash into a tree at speed. You'll need an ultrasound to see if you've ruptured them. The rare outcome is you lose one or both balls, but the testes or testis can be salvageable, although your ghoulies might not be quite as good at making semen as they used to be. The good news is that 90% of these ruptures lead to a full recovery and a working set of healthy nuts. There's another thing we should talk about, and that's the missing bean. This is what one person wrote on Reddit when the topic of worst testicle hit was raised. Riding a bicycle in the rain, feet slip off the pedals, I land on the crossbar, and one of my nuts ends up inside me. What happened to him was he suffered a testicular dislocation, wherein a lone marble can get hit so hard that it ends up going into your abdomen or even close to the pubic bone over the penis. According to one health site, indeed, this often happens when riders of bicycles or motorbikes hit their nads on the frame or gas tank. It is rare, but it does happen, and you'll need surgery and a bit of testicular repositioning if you want your egg to keep working. We hate to tell you this, but there's also something called being degloved, which is your scrotum just being torn right off. But we're talking about hits today, and it's not likely you'll get degloved from a blunt force trauma unless you're involved in some kind of vicious accident. The rule of thumb is that if your pain doesn't go away in, say, 20 minutes, you might want to get your testicles looked at. Also, if you start peeing blood after the hit, of course, get that checked out. Over to you now. Tell us about the worst time you were hit in the testicles. How did it happen? And was it over quickly, or did you get one of those types of more severe injuries? Also, do you know how many terms we used for testicles in this story? Let us know in the comments. Be sure to check out our other video called Most Painful Things a Person Can Experience. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.